You get that out of the way so I don't pound it with my gavel. Committee will come to order. Good morning and welcome to the second day of our public witness hearings for American Indian and Alaska Native programs. I also want to welcome all the distinguished tribal elders and leaders here today and to thank our witnesses for appearing before the committee and sharing your concerns on these important issues. I know it's not always easy to travel to Washington, D.C. Coming from Idaho, I know how long that is and stuff, so I appreciate you coming today. In terms of hearing logistics, I will call each panel of witnesses to the table, one panel at a time. Each witness will have 5 minutes to present their testimony. Your full written testimony will be included in the record, so please don't feel pressured to cover everything in 5 minutes. We will be using a timer to track the progress of each witness. When the light turns orange, the witness will have 1 minute remaining to conclude his or her remarks. When the light turns red, we will have to ask the witnesses to stop to remain on schedule because we have a lot of testimony to get through today. We'll hear from every witness on each panel before members will be provided an opportunity to ask questions. Because we have a full day ahead, I request that we try to keep things moving so we can stay on schedule and respect each other's time. I also want to note that committee rules prohibit the use of outside cameras and audio equipment during these hearings. The hearing can be viewed in its entirety on the committee's website, and an official hearing transcript will be available at gpo.gov. I'm happy to yield to Ranking Member Pingree for any remarks that she may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good morning to everyone. I want to repeat his welcome and just thank you for traveling great distances to you and all of the witnesses that we'll hear from today. We really appreciate you taking your time and coming from long distances to be with us. It may seem at times like 5 minutes isn't very long to tell us all the things that we would like to hear from you, but I want you to know it makes a huge difference to us. 2 days of listening to people, compiling what you all have to say and many of the similarities of the challenges that certain tribes are facing. So it really is very beneficial to the committee, to preparing the 2025 Appropriations Bill, and we're really grateful for you being here to do that. So I'll yield back to the chair.
Thank you. Robert, you're up first.
Good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee. On behalf of the entire Occitan Indian community in Maricopa, Arizona, thank you for providing this opportunity to share our funding priorities for the 2025 fiscal year. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you once again. Again, my name is Robert McGill, and I have served as chairman for the Occitan Indian community for 9 years. In my time as chairman, I have seen our community achieve transformative successes, and that success will help us attain the exciting future we are creating. Our community's funding priorities for the upcoming year include increasing support for our public necessity programs, including public health, public safety, infrastructure, and the like. Additionally, we are also concerned with the logistical challenges created by the processes through which funds are administered. This includes the need for advance appropriations for IHS and BIA, burdens in the grant process, and government agencies' commitment to promoting self-governance. Public health and safety of our community is our top priority. We are exploring opportunities to open and operate our own health clinic, and our existing clinic needs funds to maintain and expand the direct care services performed on site. We also request increased funding for the Purchase Referred Care Program, which facilitates treatment of services the existing clinic is not equipped to handle. Health funding is vital to ensuring the well-being of our community. Public safety and justice. Our public safety programs provide on-ground support for our members, visitors, and growing neighboring communities. We respectfully request that the committee maintains its commitments to the Occitan people with appropriate increases in public safety and justice funding for FY 2025. Our membership benefits when the police are integrated into the fabric of our communities as trusted neighbors and friends. This requires investment into programs and resources, but in turn it creates a safer and more cohesive community. Social services and education. We also seek increased funding for health and human services and education. The behavioral and mental health issues confronting Indian country are well documented, and addressing these challenges is a major component of our work to promote the community's health and safety. As a community with many young members, we must adequately fund social services to strengthen families and provide the next generation with a happy and healthy home to grow. We prioritize education's role in ensuring the brightest future for our young members. Occitan uses the Johnson O'Malley funds we receive to directly benefit our school-aged children and prepare them for success in the classroom. Infrastructure improvements and maintenance. We are proud of our community's growth, but with more members comes increased burdens to infrastructure. We must address these issues with funding for maintenance of existing resources, but also for new capital projects. Unfortunately, current funding is too low to support even maintenance needs. Take internet access for one example. The Biden administration broadband grant has helped us expand internet coverage, but our neighbors continue to grow and we must keep up. Our young people are resilient and work hard, but no student should be forced to drive to a local McDonald's parking lot at night to submit a work assignment because they lack access to internet. We still have those problems. 105 lease operations and maintenance. As the committee is aware, the 105 lease program allows the reimbursement of facility repairs when part of a facility is used to carry out self-determination programs. Many of our eligible facilities need repairs, but we have experienced serious difficulty and delay using these programs. The program appears backlogged and underfunded. If adequate funded, 105 offers an exciting opportunity to ensure earmarks for programs go directly where they are needed most. Instead, we sometimes find ourselves with major facility issues like a leaking roof that requires us to direct funds to address these facility costs first. Promoting efficiency and grant funding processes. We appreciate initiatives like the administration's Executive Order 14112 on self-determination and government's commitment to respect tribal authority and autonomy and promote our shared interests. I have witnessed promising improvements to the appropriations and funding process, but we must continue to ensure bureaucratic and red tape and complicated applications process do not prevent an efficient funding process. Again, I want to thank the committee for allowing us to be here once again, and I cannot emphasize the importance of these issues to our community's priorities and continued growth. At this time, I'd like to recognize my daughter, Stella McGill, and the entire student body at A+ Charter School in Maricopa, Arizona, who are watching online. Thank you.
Welcome to all you students from Maricopa County. Thank you, Robert. Sherry?
Good morning. My name is Sherry Parker. I'm the chairwoman of the Hualapai tribe located in Peach Springs, Arizona. I'd like to thank the subcommittee for the opportunity to present this testimony in support of the Bureau of Indian Affairs request in the amount of $45 million to begin to fulfill the United States obligation under the Hualapai Tribe Water Rights Settlement of 2022. The Hualapai Reservation encompasses approximately 1 million acres in northwestern Arizona. The Colorado River forms the 108-mile northern boundary of the reservation through a portion of the Grand Canyon. The reservation is arid. It has no significant surface streams other than the Colorado River. It has very limited groundwater resources. The tribe's groundwater wells are depleted. Resource and well levels in the reservation have dropped significantly over the years. The Hualapai Tribe Settlement resolves the tribe's reserved water right claims in the state of Arizona. It resolves the tribe's claims. The act secures the 4,000 acre-feet of Central Arizona project water for the Colorado River and authorizing $312 million to be deposited into Hualapai Water Tribe Fund to allow the tribe to implement the settlement by constructing and operating an infrastructure project to deliver this water to the reservation. The Settlement Act provides that Congress must appropriate all the settlement funds by April 15th, 2029 for the settlement to remain in effect. If this does not happen, the Settlement Act will, by its terms, be repealed and the benefits of the settlement for not only the tribe but for all the parties, including the United States, the state of Arizona, the Central Arizona Project, the Salt Water Project, the Salt River Project, and Freeport Minerals Company, will evaporate. A key component of the Settlement Act is that as soon as any appropriated funds are deposited into the Hualapai Water Trust Fund, the tribe can begin to expend these monies to do compliance activities required by federal law for construction of the infrastructure project. including the environmental studies required by the National Environmental Policy Act. The appropriation of the $45 million requested by the Bureau of Indian Affairs will allow the tribe to begin to do this important NEPA work now, so that when the trust fund is fully funded, the tribe can begin to do the actual construction of the project that will finally deliver a safe and secure supply of water to the reservation. It is urgent that this be accomplished as soon as possible for the reasons set forth below. The tribe's principal residential community in Peach Springs relies exclusively on 3 groundwater wells in the Truxtun Aquifer near the reservation's southern boundary. Since those wells were installed in 1975, the piping for the system is 49 years old and has failed in the recent past, leaving our community without water for several days. One of the wells has suffered episodes of dangerous E. coli and chloroform contamination. We have not been able to identify the source of the contamination. When the well is out of service because of contamination, we are unable to supply sufficient water to the community, so we have to implement strict mandatory conservation measures. Because the groundwater is currently the only source of water for our residential needs on the reservation, we are very vulnerable to any short-term interruptions in supply from these wells, and also to the long-term decline in the levels of the Truxtun Aquifer that supplies our groundwater. This situation is even worse elsewhere on the reservation. On the western side of the reservation, the tribe successfully operates a tourist attraction called Grand Canyon West that overlooks the Grand Canyon and has 1 million visitors per year. While employing several hundred tribal members for the past 3 years after 2 wells that served Grand Canyon West failed, the tribe has been forced to haul water 15 miles to the original well sites, where the water must then be pumped for 35 miles out to the Grand Canyon West. This patchwork system is burdensome, insecure, and very expensive, but it is the only way we continue our vital tourist operations at Grand Canyon West. The $45 million in the BIA funding request is the first installment in the Hualapai Tribe Water Rights Settlement Act, and is essential if the tribe is to attain a secure future on our reservation. We have done everything possible to allow our reservation to be a permanent livable homeland, including developing government, developing an economy to provide jobs and income to our people. But the lack of secure and replenishable water supply on reservation has been a major obstacle that prevents us from achieving economic self-sufficiency, a goal that the federal Indian policy has long favored. On the history of Indian land and water settlements, Congress has never failed to provide the funding necessary by the enforceability date of a settlement. Therefore, we urgently ask the subcommittee to now take the first step to full implementation of the Act and include $45 million in the Bureau of Indian Affairs Indian Rights Water Rights Settlement account for the Hualapai Tribe Water Act settlement. Friends, as leaders, we all do our best for the future of those we serve. This Water Settlement Act is for the future of our children, our grandchildren, and those yet to come. So we leaders of today depend and hope for this water settlement appropriations for the future existence of the Hualapai tribe, its people, that we can support all of those that we serve, that we all serve. Thank you for this opportunity to speak, and as always, may God bless the Hualapai tribe, all tribal nations, and the United States of America. Great is the nation whose God is the Lord. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you both for your testimony. I appreciate Indian water rights has become a bigger and bigger issue, whether it's in Oklahoma or whether it's in Arizona, whether it's in Idaho. And that's something that we're going to have to deal with for sure. So people sometimes forget out west we live in a desert, and water is a huge issue. So we look forward to working with you on trying to get these water rights settlements funded and so forth. Robert, I appreciate your testimony. I'm going to tell you something that this is my perception. If 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, somebody would have asked me what will be the issues that they talk about the most here in these 2 days of tribal hearings, I would have guessed 100% it would be healthcare. And I'm not hearing a lot of healthcare. Not that it's not important, but most of the focus is on some other things like that. I think that is in large part due to the work that our ranking member did on advanced appropriations for NIH. And while our amount is not anywhere near where it should be to address the needs and stuff, there seems to be much more focus this year on Indian law enforcement and the challenges that that brings, and the fact that you have huge reservations with very few officers there, missing and murdered indigenous women, that type of thing, and education. So the focus has kind of changed, not relieving the focus that we need to continue on healthcare, but with the resources that we've had, we've put them mainly into trying to improve the healthcare system and get along with what we have in the other things. But we need to start focusing on those other things like law enforcement and education on Indian reservations. So I sincerely appreciate your testimony and stuff. One of the things I would say, and I'll say that for both you and people in the audience, I've been approached by several tribes across the country, different parts, about whether NIH or Indian Health Services, if Indian Health Services is the best way to deliver health care to the tribes, or whether we could do more by direct appropriation to the tribes rather than go through Health and Human Services and stuff. I don't know the answer to that. And I've asked Indian Health Services the same questions and stuff. Are we looking at the right model of how to get the best bang for the buck that we spend on health services? And we're going to be pursuing this hopefully, well, not hopefully, but with the tribes on what's the best way to do this. Is there a model that's better in getting it done, making sure that the dollars that we do spend are used most effectively? I don't expect anybody to answer this, but let's put some thought into it, all of you out there, about is this the best way to do it? Or, you know, the people who care most about the health care of their tribal members are the tribes. And so I don't have any problem with a direct appropriation. It's more difficult than it sounds to do and stuff, and to make it fair and stuff. And it might be right for some larger tribes that could do that. Smaller tribes might have difficulty doing that. But I think it's something that we ought to always look at, trying to improve on the services that we have and how we deliver those services. So I'd be interested as we get into this issue for your input on what you think about this. It's not going to be the same for every tribe, for sure, but let's talk about it and see if we can do better while we work on trying to improve these other areas of the budget. But thank you both for your testimony today. True bet.
Thank you for that, Chairman Simpson, and you hit it on the nail on the head. There's 574 tribes in the United States of America, federally recognized tribes. I would challenge the committee and the administration to go and visit some of these tribes that don't have their voices, that don't have the ability or the resources to come here and advocate for themselves. There's a number of them out there. So in order for us to make things right, we need to look out for those, what we say are the tribes that don't have a voice, that can't be here. They're just as important as we are. We're able to be here to advocate and move our issues across, but there's a number of other tribes out there that are forgotten. So please reach out to them also.
I appreciate that very much. We have done, when I was chairman before, we did some traveling out to some of the reservations, because it's important for us to meet you on your lands and see firsthand what's going on and what the challenges are and so forth. And I know we've done the same thing when both Representative McCullum and Representative Pingree were chairman of this committee, and it's something we need to continue doing. It's one thing to call you back here for 5 minutes of testimony and talk to you about it and stuff. It's something else to go out on the reservation and actually talk to people and see the challenges that you're facing on the reservations. It kind of changes your mind, and you're right. There are a lot of tribes. We're going to have more testimony from more tribes this time than I think we've ever had, which is a great response. I love that. But you're right. There are a lot of tribes that can't afford to and can't make the arrangements to come and testify before Congress. So thank you for those comments. Ms. Pingree.
Yeah, I think the chair covered it very well. Thank you so much for your testimony, and we certainly have heard a lot in the past day about law enforcement, and it really stems from the fact that we're only funding about 15% of the need or less. So obviously that's a very serious concern, but I think every tribe would tell us they still have concerns around healthcare, education. We hear about the roads, the infrastructure, and the water settlements where, we learn a lot about each one when someone comes before us, and I can see the dire need to make sure that your community can survive and continue the economic development that you've been doing. So we'll definitely give that some focus. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here.
If I could, Mr. Miguel, I'd like to go back to the Johnson O'Malley because it's come up here before. And the three of us have worked on Johnson O'Malley to get a count and everything else. Now we're hearing the money's not going out. Tribes have a youth bulge. That's a good thing. That means families are staying. But it also brings with it, I used to teach high school, a lot of unique challenges as they get older. So you mentioned the broadband, the internet, and everything else. Could maybe the two of you, if you have the information at the top of your tongue, that's great. If you don't, if you could get back to us, we're going to try to do a brief on what's happening with Johnson O'Malley funds. But we heard yesterday, I think they were in arrears like almost three years for Johnson O'Malley. And the broadband shouldn't be paid out of Johnson O'Malley. I want to be very clear about that. We need to speed that up. But Johnson O'Malley is something you could use. And then for your cultural centers also for youth, right? So cultural centers are available for the 501. Life, health, and safety are supposed to be the priorities. Could you just take a second and embellish on that a little more if you want to add anything more?
Yes, we have a lot of, we have Johnson O'Malley on our reservation, and I think it's just a really limited budget that kind of helps us to get our students back and forth and help provide a little bit of the education supplement that they might need, and also for parents to go back and forth to attend graduations and education and stuff like that. But we have a lot of situations, a lot of and this is only one part of our water rights settlement, but everything stems from trying to get our children, and those are our most important assets, getting them the education, getting them the funds that they need to go attend school wherever they may please. So we're trying our greatest to make sure that we do that, but we do fall short on funds and on money to make sure that we can help our people. So this is just one part of what we're requesting and what we're looking at. But we do have issues with law enforcement, with health care, and with all the other stuff that, comes along with that. But we're making a great effort to address all those issues within our reservation, but we still don't have everything that we need. But we appreciate you listening to us and coming here to push these things forward. And there is a lot. I mean, there's a lot more than just one thing. So thank you.
Yes, in Johnson O'Malley, it is limited within our community, but we also use funding through Johnson O'Malley for just different programs for our youth and even our early childhood. So we're always looking at other opportunities, but again, it is limited. We do most of the funding overall, but Johnson O'Malley does provide some gap closure as far as what we need to fund as we move forward. So we're benefiting from it, but we'd like to do much more than what we have today. So,
and thank you. So, Mr. Chair, I agree with all the remarks that you and the ranking member made, and we were talking about mandating health care at one point. These water settlements are judgments. These water settlements are contracts the United States government entered into, and the settlement's kind of a one-time settlement. And paying for these settlements out of the budget that we have is not going to work. And so I think the administration and the Congress need to figure out how to get these dollars out. And I would think a water settlement, once we sign our names, it's not a treaty, but it's similar to it, right, should be paid. And this would be one-time mandated money, and maybe that's something we can talk to our colleagues in Ways and Means and the rest on, because other than that, it's going to be a huge price tag, and to their point, it falls apart if the money doesn't come in. then we're spending money on attorneys to do this all over again. And the suffering, the disappointment, and the lack of us being responsible to another document that the federal government signed to is another broken promise on the many we're trying to mend. So we're going to give him not a magic gavel, but a magic wand at the end to fix everything. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that, and I always thought that's why we had a judgment fund in the Department of Justice, is to pay for settlements. So that's something we need to look at too. So anyway, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the newest member of this committee, I'd just like to extend my appreciation to you for coming to D.C. to share what's important to you. I'm recognizing I have one tribe in my district, but the needs of that tribe are significantly different than those that I'm hearing from these sessions. So I'm finding them very useful, very informative. Thank you for taking the time to come and share your needs and thoughts with us.
Thank you both for being here today, and welcome to our visitors from Arizona that are listening by camera and your students, and we appreciate them participating in this. But thank you all. I appreciate your testimony. Yes. Sure.
Just one more person. I'm sorry. We mentioned water. Our auction was the first to ever have its water settlement recognized. And I'd like to recognize the late Leona Caker, who spearheaded our cause. We lost her about 3 weeks ago, and again, she was an icon and who I call the greatest leader the auction Indian community's ever had. So I'd like to recognize her, Leona Caker.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. And, you know, I look at what's happening in the Colorado River Basin, from the upper basin to the lower basin. Man, there are some needs there. I've always said in Idaho, and I suspect it's true in Arizona and other dry, arid states, is that there's no problem that a really good water year won't solve. You know. So anyway, thank you all for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We have. Okay. Okay. Mr. Lewis, Mr. Chavez, Mr. Leslie, Mr. Nagrin. Mr. Lewis, you're first.
Skugsiata, good morning. Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree, thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of the Gila River Indian community. Today, I'll highlight 3 appropriation requests. First, funding to implement the community's 2018 trust accounting claim. Second, legislative language to clarify that a grade expansion at the Casablanca Community School is authorized and approved. And third, mandatory funding for the Section 105L program. The Community's Trust Accounting Act was signed into law on December 21st of 2018. The act specifically mandated the surveying of all federal rights-of-way within the reservation within 6 years of enactment of the law, subject to appropriations. Now, Chairman, we're now in our 6th year, and unfortunately the surveys are far from complete because of insufficient appropriations. Without these surveys, critical infrastructure projects that impact our roadways, canals, and electrical system infrastructure will be delayed because of the lack of federal rights-of-way documentation. Now, during this time of renewed federal investment in the nation's infrastructure, the incomplete surveys will delay critical infrastructure projects on our reservation. Now, Chairman, while the community appreciates the $1 million appropriated to date, the current estimate for FY25 to complete the surveys is $4.9 million. Now, under the surveying until the surveying is completed, rather, this portion of the community settlement with the United States remains unsolved. The community's second request is for bill language, allowing our 6th graders to attend the Casablanca Community School. Now, this school was constructed utilizing the Section 105L program and opened in 2021. The community constructed a K through 6th grade school based on Bureau of Indian Education documentation at the time that listed the previous school as a K through 5 school, and with an understanding that the BIE would utilize the language in the Interior Appropriations Bill, allowing the Secretary to issue a 1-grade waiver. However, during 105L lease negotiations, BIE staff at Albuquerque determined the school was listed as K-5 in error and reclassified it as a K through 4th grade school, which limited the 1-year grade waiver to the 5th grade. Now, at this time, our 6th grade classrooms remain empty, and our students must leave the school after the 5th grade, which is a critical time in their educational attainment and development. In effect, our 6th grade students are being punished for the Bureau of Indian Education's paperwork error. Now, Chairman Simpson, I know you understand this issue because you've recognized the need and included the very first grade waiver language during your previous tenure as chairman. Now, in the following years, the subcommittee has recognized and resolved other similar unintended consequences of a grade expansion moratorium, when doing so would not have a significant impact on the federal budget. Now, Chairman, in this case, the anticipated cost to fund the 6th grade school operations would be approximately $369,000. We're asking for a simple language adjustment that has been included in our written testimony to address this issue for the 2025-2026 school year. We've conferred with Interior, and they support the language, and we have requested, and this language was also included in the President's budget as well. Now, Chairman, members of the committee, the stakes are really high for our students. The school was designed not only to provide a top-notch education rooted in our culture at a state-of-the-art facility, but it serves a high number of also special needs students as well. Parents and teachers struggle to match those students with the type of program that we offer, and have repeatedly stated that even one more year at our community-run BIE school can make a big difference in our students' abilities to learn and thrive in a safe, supportive environment. Now, this leads to the community's final request: mandatory funding for the Section 105L program. Now, this committee had the vision to back the pilot program for the 105L construction program, and it was the community that partnered with you to develop the construction leaseback program as an alternative to the piecemeal funding of BIE schools through this construction priority list. Now, in 2019, we opened our first school utilizing the 105L lease program, the Gila Crossing Community School. Tribes across the country are now entering into leases for existing facilities and new facilities that carry out self-governance programs. But as the program grows, so does the portion of federal funding dedicated to the federal lease obligations. We recognize the reality facing this subcommittee and its repeated calls for a long-term funding solution. Now, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, if the program continues at the current pace, funding for the Section 105L program will continue to prevent this subcommittee from funding other critical tribal programs in the areas of healthcare, social services, natural resources, law enforcement, and education. This committee saw the vision and opportunity that the Section 105L program offers tribes across Indian country. We're now asking for the program and staffing costs to be transitioned to mandatory funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Irvin, go ahead.
Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree. Again, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about the appropriation priorities of the Navajo School Board Association, DeBozba. My name is Irvin Chavez, and I'm the Executive Board Chair for DeBozba. The Navajo Nation established DeBozba to represent the locally elected school board from the Bureau of Indian education-funded schools located on the Navajo Nation in Arizona and New Mexico. Of the 66 member schools, 32 are operated by the Bureau of Indian Education, and 34 are operated by tribally controlled schools. The BOSBA membership constitutes more than 1/3 of the 183 BIE-funded schools nationwide. The BOSBA unites school boards to advocate for educational programs, services that ensure that each Navajo student graduates with preparation to lead a productive and fulfilling life with knowledge and understanding of Navajo language and culture. ISEP funds are the core accounts for both BIE-operated and tribally controlled school. Increases in ISEP funds help attract and retain quality teachers who are vital to our students' academic success. Unfortunately, there are teacher shortage all across this country, but the shortage is particularly acute on Navajo Nation, where many schools are operated in remote locations. New Mexico and Arizona public schools have responded to the teacher shortage by a substantial increase in their salaries. The $518 million that the BIA requested for ISEP fund for FY 2025 provides estimated W weight student unit at 8,033 per student. When adding this prorated non-ISEP line item which school receives per student is far behind the $25,000 that Department of Defense Education spends for students and estimated $14,000 that the public school spends for students. When recommending $950 million for FY25 ISEP funding, Tribal Interior Budget Council were only simply recommending Congress provide parity. School replacement, construction, and facility improvement. The BIE education construction budget significantly impacts the health and safety of our students and our staff. Unfortunately, many of our students throughout the BIE funded system are far beyond and the end of their useful life and needs to be replaced. Many of these schools are in poor and dangerous conditions on Navajo Nation. The BIE FY 2025 budget justification reports that only 5 of 10 schools of the 2016 school replacement are listed. Of the 40 that are still undone. Of the 40 schools throughout the assessment capital improvement, only 10 are classified as funded. If we take these 30 unfunded schools identified through the SASI process and estimate $90 million per school, totaling about $2.5 billion of unfunded school waiting to be current on the SASI replacement alone. If Congress continues to fund school construction at $116 million per fiscal year, Congress will never catch up. The BOSBA urges Congress to protect and increase educational construction fund. We also urge Congress to swiftly reauthorize the Great American Outdoors Act, which supplemented $95 million a year for 5 years to help address the staggering, dangerous backlog of BIE-funded school system. In conclusion, I would like to turn to the oversight matters. Congress has provided clear statutory parameters to facilitate Indian control of all issues related to education. BIE continues to undermine the local school board authority at BIE-operated school by ignoring statutory mandates that require consultation with tribal school boards and making hiring and budgeting decisions and provide school boards with approval over such decisions. BIE is also subjecting tribally controlled schools to advertisement requirements that are permitted by statute and nor agreement by the school. This perpetuates the federal bureaucracy domination of Indian programs. These policies have adverse practical effects on BIE that have made it much more difficult and much more expensive for Navajo schools to provide quality education services in our community. The BOSBA is seeking report language to direct BIA to establish training program that ensures BIA officials at all levels to comply with statutory framework governing Indian education. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Eric?
Dagot and greetings from the White Mountain Apache tribe from White River, Arizona. My name is Derek Leslie. I am of the Red Horizontal people, born for the Mesquite people, and hail from the community of Turkey Creek. I come before you today in my role as Tribal Education Director, and as a member of our tribe's health board. It is my hope that this brief testimony provides a glimpse of the realities facing my people in the area of Indian education and health. As Tribal Education Director, I oversee the Adult Vocational Training Program, the Adult Education Program, the Office of Higher Education, the Johnson O'Malley Program, and the Vocational Rehabilitation Programs, respectively. We were saddened to see the $1 million cut to the Johnson O'Malley Program under the BIE's current fiscal year budget. We appreciate the passage of the JOM Modernization Act and are excited about the update to the student count. Since JOM funding is based on the 1995 student count, we anticipate a significant increase to the JOM student count, but are worried that current funding levels of the JOM program are not adequate enough to support any increase in the student count. We support any budget increase to the JOM program based on input from Indian country through formal tribal consultations. The Bureau of Indian Education has many deficiencies and obstructions in its efforts to educate our students. The need for school replacement on my reservation is one of our highest priorities. The Dishchibico Community School in Sibiku and the John F. Kennedy Day School in Cedar Creek are both in need of new schools. They do their best to educate our Apache students within the current BIE system. The Theodore Roosevelt School in Fort Apache was selected in 2016 for the school replacement program. While we are elated at this prospect, we know that based on current process and appropriations, we will not get our new school for several years, especially since the education construction line item was cut this current fiscal year. To this end, we strongly recommend that the BIE create and implement a long-term facilities plan similar to the Department of Defense process in 2009. The BIE recently ended its series of listening sessions concerning the Indian Student Equalization Program, ISEP, and student transportation funding formulas. We support the negotiated rulemaking activities of ISEP and student transportation included in the BIE's FY25 budget proposal. I also serve on the Tribal Interior Budget Council's Education Subcommittee, and in our recent meetings in March of 2004, the BIE was able to provide us with their $93 million estimate to adequately fund school resource officers within their school systems. This estimate includes funding for the salaries of 412 SROs for their K-12 and higher education institutions, both tribally controlled and bureau operated within the BIE school systems. This estimate includes equipment and training for all SROs. With gun violence in schools increasing across the country, Indian country cannot wait for more assistance to keep our schools and communities safe. Therefore, we support the budget request for the BIE to fund school resource officers. I would be remiss if I did not mention the work of the Native American Council, the National Advisory Council on Indian Education, or NACI, which was established in 1972. Since its inception, NACI has provided 268 recommendations to improve the state of Indian education in its annual congressional report. Sadly, only 20% of these recommendations have been partially implemented, while 0% have been fully implemented. This is simply unacceptable, and part of the problem is NACI is unfunded congressional mandate. We support the current budget request for NACI and challenge all members of Congress to read their annual congressional report and help us improve Indian country by enacting the recommendations. In the closing section of my testimony, I will share some of our health priorities, with our new hospital being among them. The current existing White River Indian Hospital was completed in 1979 and is now over 45 years old. It is outdated for expansion to meet the mandatory requirements for medical informatics infrastructure. My tribe is supportive of the building of a new hospital in our community, and last estimates project the total cost of construction to be $648 million. We ask for your support in appropriating these funds. We were recently awarded the Special Diabetes Programs for Indians grant, which we were grateful for. This funding was reauthorized through December 31st of this current calendar year, after seeing increases in funding for this important work in our communities. We strongly implore its reauthorization so any and all disruptions to this critical work in Indian country can be avoided. The White Mountain Apache tribe appreciates the support of this subcommittee as we all work together to make Indian country a better and safer place to work and live. I thank you for your time and considerations.
Yate, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee. I just want to say thank you so much for having me here, and our tribal leaders today. My name is Dr. Blue Nygren, President of the Navajo Nation. I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you regarding the funding needs of Indian country for fiscal year 2025. The Navajo Nation is arguably the largest Native American tribe in the country. The Navajo Nation makes up 1/3 of the on-reservation population in Indian country. We provide crucial services to more than 400,000 enrolled members. Our lands cover more than 27,000 square miles, spans across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. As tribal leaders, we are caretakers of our government. We work to uphold our duties to our people, ensuring their health, safety, and education and overall welfare. However, we recognize that achieving these goals requires partnership and support from the federal government, in particular in fulfilling its trust and treaty commitments to tribal nations. First, we ask that the Indian Health Services and Bureau of Indian Affairs be exempted from automatic budget cuts. The chronic underfunding of these programs shows a failure of the federal government's trust obligations to tribes, putting at risk the progress made over the years. Automatic budget cuts disproportionately affects Indian country, endangering vital services such as healthcare, public safety, and education. I also ask that you approve mandatory funding for these programs to provide the stability needed to ensure and the continuation of crucial services. The success of mandatory funding for the IHS highlights the importance of this model, supporting vital healthcare services for tribal communities. Expanding mandatory funding to BIA programs and services would also provide stability and ensure the federal government's trust to tribes during these times of financial doubt. Also, the Navajo Indian Child Welfare Act program faces severe underfunding and restrictions, operating with a $3.4 million shortfall despite limited staff. Currently, there are 400 active cases involving 748 Navajo children, but our small team struggles to keep up with the workload. Full funding of $46 million would help us protect and reunite Navajo children with their families. Additionally, the current funding levels for tribal law enforcement, tribal courts, and correctional facilities are drastically insufficient to meet the growing needs of our communities. We need increased funding for public safety and justice initiatives, particularly within the BIA. We recommend providing $2.9 billion to the Bureau's Public Safety and Justice account, including an increase of $26 million for the Navajo Nation. The legacy of uranium mining has left a deep scar within our people. Despite the Navajo people contributing to America's nuclear agenda, where 30 million tons, which is half of all domestic supply of uranium, came from the Navajo Nation, we continue to struggle with death, disease, and contamination. The Navajo people are resilient. Since our treaty signing in 1868, we have worked with the federal government to be patriotic Americans, offering our language, our resources to advance and protect our country. In return, we humbly ask for your commitment to honor the contributions we have made and to protect generations yet to be born. There are over 500 abandoned uranium mine sites on our nation. Despite some cleanup efforts, many sites lack federal funding, exposing the Navajo people to long-term impacts of uranium contamination. Immediate action is required to allocate resources for cleanup, monitoring, maintenance of priority sites, and to develop a long-term disposal solution in collaboration with our federal agencies. Please set aside $5 billion to address this issue. The Bureau of Reclamation's 2025 budget request proposes expanding Indian Water Rights Settlement Completion Fund to include current settlements. This proposal will allocate $2.8 billion over 10 years for settlement and $34 million annually for operations, maintenance, and rehabilitation needs. Furthermore, thousands of homes lack proper infrastructure for sewage disposal, solid waste management, leading to health issues such as stomach disease and high infant death rates. Support for the IHS sanitation facilities construction budget request of $200 million is critical to address the water crisis on the Navajo Reservation and throughout Indian country. In conclusion, I urge the subcommittee to prioritize these funding recommendations in the fiscal year 2025 appropriations package by investing in the health, education, infrastructure, and economic development of tribal communities. We honor our nation-to-nation relationships and to advance justice and equity for all of Indian country. With that, I just want to say thank you so much. Hehe Hodo and Kina Nishidat Enigi as Yego Shiklilon Hoden Hanianigi Shilpa Hojonto Ashibahone Zanito Skilling Deal Nashton Beso Bohone Zanito the Nebekea Bacado between Sligi Art and Bacado Waterban Siske Sebe Hehan Kadini do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you for your testimony. Nice to see you, President Nygren, again. And thank you for sort of laying out the needs of a huge tribe with so much land mass and many of the issues that we've been talking about already, from mine cleanup in other communities to the law enforcement issues. So I hope we can do more in this budget to address the needs that you're bringing up. And Governor Lewis, I think I met with you before on the 6th grade issue, and I am sorry to say I didn't realize it was still unresolved. And I feel for you having this, beautiful facility and kids not being able to attend it. And I'm sure our committee will try to wrap our heads around the bureaucratic issues that are standing in the way and sort that out. And very much appreciate hearing from both of you. It hasn't come up as much during the last 2 days, but the backlog of school construction is so serious, and I think sometimes we let it slip off our conversation, but I know that so many communities wait way too long for the schools that are much needed in the infrastructure, and thank you for all the issues that were brought up before us. Yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Governor Lewis, I don't know who made that clerical error on transposing a 4 instead of a 5, but this is nonsense. That we have to have language in appropriations bill for somebody, doesn't really matter who, that we're not agile enough with this vast bureaucracy that we pay tens of millions of dollars for every year to fix that problem. Because that's on the backs of the 6th graders and on the tribe. So I have a hard time with restraining my temper when I hear nonsense like this in the 21st century, when somebody could have said, the director of the BIE, I don't know who, I don't know how this bureaucracy works, but somebody should have said, oh, we made a mistake, start school. This isn't that hard. So it just, and so that lends to hopelessness when you go, well, your Congress, fix the problem, please. Oh, well, we got to have language in there. Well, then why do we have a BIE? So as a fighter pilot who's used to launching and executing, this should be executable right now. Oh, our mistake, your mistake, doesn't matter. This is the education of these kids. Fix the problem. You need 300 grand? Here we go. In this billion-dollar bureaucracy that we got, here you go. So I just want to, as being new to this committee, I'm sure the chairman and the former chairman have heard these problems, and you guys deal with it every day. And you come up here every year and you talk about these same problems: water, 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 roads, 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 law enforcement, and yet the bureaucracy doesn't seem to comply with what your needs are. As far as the uranium cleanup, that is an absolute atrocity that we haven't done that yet. That is it's both. It's a must do. It's a shall from the federal government to fix that. It's a shall. So I don't really have any questions. I hear these things and I go, is it really this hard? And I know that you guys come back here every year saying, is it really this hard? It shouldn't be. It can't be. We have to fix it. I yield back. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate your comments, Congressman Elsey. When you're telling me about this, I'm kind of going, this is not that hard to fix. And I can't believe that it still hasn't been fixed. So it will get fixed. So I appreciate it. Ms. McCollum?
So, Mr. Chair, as we had students from Arizona listening, I know that the Bureau of Indian Education is listening. And I just talked to Ms. Pingree, and everybody can say it's complicated. I'm going to say, if we're respecting sovereignty, you're the governor. The governor in my state can have the ability of working with the Minnesota Department of Education and school districts to move classes around in buildings without asking for the federal government's support to continue to get the federal government dollars. This is crazy. And Ms. Pingree and I, with the chair, we worked on the bug school. We worked on her school in Maine. You're the success story, Governor, with what you've been able to do. And I still haven't been out there to see the school yet, but I was looking at the pictures. The kids all looked really happy. So let's you know, I mean, if we have to write a letter, we'll write a letter, but I think we kind of said what we wanted to see done, Mr. Chair. Let's see if you get a response.
I think we can make a phone call.
So I just wanted to thank you all for your testimony on education. Many of you were here for the first panel. I'm a former teacher, so this is very near and dear to me. But Mr. Chair, I started working on cleanup with Tom Udall over 20 years ago. The Bureau of our bureaus that we have here, the EPA are all involved, but energy and water's involved too. And we sat at a table, it might have been in this room back in the day when this was black before it became brown. And I never saw so much finger pointing in my whole life. And we got a few things cleaned up, but sheep die because they drink water because the dust is still spreading around. The dust comes into the homes, it gets in people's lungs. And they were supposed to have had a plan, you know, moving forward on this. But it's a plan that's taking too long, and I don't know if it's a plan that's even being implemented anymore, because each administration, when it comes in, kind of changes things around. And this committee, in my opinion, works nonpartisanly when it comes to Indian issues. And whatever happens with the next presidential election, I think we ought to bring the administration in early and just lay out our expectations. Because enough of this. We start things and then it stops because there's a new director here and a new director there. We still haven't gotten the list, I don't think. I missed several of the meetings because of the Defense Committee that I'm ranking member on. For the list of schools and the priorities in which they're being replaced and built. Have we gotten that yet? No. And I worked on that, you worked on it, Shelley worked on it, David Joyce worked on it, Ken worked on it. Enough. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. Appreciate the issues that you brought up, and we will work on these.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
members of the subcommittee as well, you have an open invitation to come out to Indian Country, to come out to the Gila River Indian community and see the 4 successful 105L, 2 schools, 1 police station, justice facility, and another that's coming up as well. So we're wanting to open this up to, we're already in the program. And thank you, Congresswoman McCollum, for saying that the 105L works for the community, works for the tribes, and we want to make sure that this is also as a mandatory funding call that this is available across Indian Country because this works. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Next is panel 16. Yeah, I'm going to screw those names up.
Is it on a wake?
Is it what?
Is it on a wake?
Yeah.
That's me.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Good to see you again. Thank you. On a wake.
Oh, no, I just told him that I grabbed mine because I knew.
Is it?
Do you have a name like mine?
Thank you all for being here today. Tisa, you're first. Tisa. Here on this end.
Okay. Bonjour, I'm Taisha Zintek, a member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation, and I serve as the president for the National Indian Education Association. Miigwech for this opportunity to provide testimony today for fiscal year 2024 funding for the Department of the Interior, Bureau of Indian Education, and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. NIEA is one of the oldest and most inclusive Native organizations, and we were founded to advance comprehensive, culture-based educational opportunities for American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians. Rooted in treaties between tribal nations and the federal government, the U.S. Constitution, and decades of legal precedent, Congress has a direct fiduciary responsibility for high-quality, culturally grounded education for all Native children. Nearly 48,000 Native students across the country are enrolled in schools funded by the Bureau of Indian Education. Due to the underfunded, rural, and remote nature of Native communities, Native students often do not have access to high-quality, culture-based education options that provide opportunities to thrive. And unfortunately, the BIE is chronically underfunded, causing irreparable detriment to our tribal youth and harming the future economic and cultural leaders of our nations. The fiscal year 24 budget for Indian education included significant cuts to both Indian education construction and Johnson O'Malley programs, while the rest of the Indian education and native language accounts were flat funded. This represents a failure to fulfill the trust and treaty obligation to tribal nations. We urge this committee to ensure that during the federal budgeting process, the education of our Native children, an obligation that is as old as the United States, is not left on the cutting room floor. The core funding for BIE elementary and secondary schools comes from the Indian School Equalization Program. These funds cover salaries for teachers and other personnel, but are often reallocated to cover the program cuts in other areas of education. For ISEP, we request $950 million in line with the Tribal Interior Budget Council's recommendation to properly fund tribal schools. NIA also requests $109 million for BIE facilities operations and $100 million for BIE facilities maintenance. BIE schools use operations and maintenance funding to cover costs such as electricity, heating fuels, and other operating expenses for preventative and routine upkeep. Underfunding of maintenance continues to be an issue as a number of buildings are in poor condition and cannot maintain proper standards. And as mentioned earlier, the BIE education construction funding was cut by $33 million in FY24, which represents a 12% reduction to one of the most necessary and already underfunded accounts within the BIE. And IEA requests $430 million for education construction in FY25 because better school buildings lead to improved conditions for learning, academic outcomes, and student achievement. But there's another route that would truly uphold the federal trust responsibility, providing mandatory appropriations for 105L leases, ensuring a cleaner process for lending, access for tribally controlled schools to construct their own facilities. For all of the tribal students who do not attend a BIE-funded school, NIEA requests $55.2 million for the Johnson O'Malley program to assist with the unique educational needs of Native students in public schools. NIEA and our members were deeply disappointed to find this account was cut in FY24. JOM programs provide critical educational resources for after-school programs, academic support, dropout prevention, funding for college access testing, and Native cultural and language enrichment. In addition, tribal education departments are responsible for administering and implementing education priorities of tribal nations and should be equal partners with state and federal education entities serving Native students. NIEA requests $10 million for tribal education agencies under the interior budget. To administer and implement these priorities, tribal education departments and agencies are vital. In most cases, tribally controlled schools, tribal education agencies, and even BIE-operated schools are the front line for Native language revitalization. Furthermore, there's a direct link between cultural identity and the cognitive success of Native students. NIEA requests $10 million for language immersion grants for BIE schools, alongside $25 million for Native language revitalization under Interior Economic Development to provide funding for tribally run Native language projects and language instruction immersion for students who are not enrolled in BIE schools, ensuring students have language and cultural support regardless of which type of school they may attend. We urge this committee to honor the necessary commitment to Indian education, a commitment the United States made even before the U.S. Department of Education existed. A commitment that was paid for by the loss of life and land experienced in our nations. We urge you to support these recommendations. Miigwech. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yate, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the House Subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to submit testimony regarding fiscal year 2025 appropriations for Indian Country. My name is Shauna Allison Vicente, and I'm head of School of Navajo Preparatory School, Navajo Prep, a proud alumna of the school. With me is Sherrick Roanhorse, who is the Vice President of the Navajo Prep's Board of Trustees, as well as an alumnus of Navajo Prep. As head of school, my responsibility include advocating for state, federal, and tribal funding. Navajo Preparatory School is a tribally controlled school and is located in Farmington, New Mexico. As an international baccalaureate world school, Navajo Prep serves 285 students in grades 9th through 12th and allows students to compete for a competitive international diploma. College education for our Navajo youth is an exception for Navajo parents and our Navajo is expectation, I should say, for Navajo parents and our Navajo leaders. Navajo Prep's achievements are substantial, with 98% of our 2023 graduates being accepted into a four-year institutions and a remarkable 73% college graduation rate within 6 years, significantly surpassing both the national and state levels for Native students. Navajo Prep's success is represented by the alumni of the school who fulfill the mission and vision Yidis Congo Natani, meeting leaders now and into the future. Since Navajo Prep was founded in 1991, we have graduated 1,262 alumni. However, the number is higher if we include the 100 years of education with the Methodist Mission School, Mission Academy, and Navajo Academy. Our critical priority is sustaining the Diné language and culture to strengthen the identity of our students. We are in a state of emergency. It is estimated only 51% of Navajo people spoke our Diné language in 2010. By 2040, it is estimated that less than 5% of Diné people will speak our language. Schools serving Indigenous communities have an obligation to address this language loss crisis. Federal funding and competitive grants have allowed our school to develop innovative solutions to work to address critical language loss of 110 chapter communities on the Navajo Nation, and to supplement our Indian School Equalization Program, our ISEP funds. The process of securing additional supplemental funding requires additional staff, time, and resources. Navajo Prep commends the subcommittee for its past support of BIE funding and respectfully urges to address historical underfunding by substantially increasing the fiscal year 2025 Interior Appropriations Bill. Please see our written statements that outline our funding recommendations. For example, we are requesting, as well with NIEA and our other team here, $951.1 million for ISEP. BIE funds 129 tribally controlled schools across the United States. There are many funding constraints for tribally controlled schools. Tribally controlled schools cannot draw on local tax base. We primarily rely upon federal funding, which is a federal and treaty responsibility. Navajo Prep has to be creative, as well as all tribally controlled schools have to be creative to supplement for safety and security, food service staffing, technology infrastructure, CTE, college and technical education, wellness programming, equipment management. It's all not included in ISEP calculations. ISEP calculations do not allow for pay parity within the individual state. For example, thanks to our governor and our legislators, the state of New Mexico increased teacher and administrative pay for state-funded schools. But to remain competitive, Navajo Prep had to increase salaries with no increase to ISEP or tribal grant support cost funding. Tribally controlled schools' reality is that ISEP funds students at roughly $6,900 of the average state pupil per funding of $16,000, which is grossly inadequate compared to the only other fully funded federal education system. The Department of Defense Education Agency funds at $25,000 per pupil. BIE schools need at least a 50% increase in ISEP funding to bring BIE to parity with the national average. Furthermore, Navajo Prep supports BIE's initiative to transition contract support costs and 105 lease payments to mandatory funding. The President's fiscal year 2025 proposed budget and the BIE's funding requests will continue to result in a shortfall in BIE funding. We respectfully urge the subcommittee to increase BIE funding. We urge you to uphold the federal trust responsibilities for which our ancestors have fought for. I am a granddaughter of Chief Manuelito. We're not asking for more funding. We're asking for what was promised within our federal Indian treaties. Ahiat.
Good morning. Chairman Simpson, thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak on the appropriations priorities for the Rama Navajo School Board Incorporated. My name is Jermanson C. Jake. I am the Rama Navajo School Board Board President. I am an enrolled member of the Rama Navajo Band of Navajos. I am also a proud product of the Rama Navajo School Board, Pine Hill Schools, a graduate of 2006. I've returned back to my community for the children's education and my elders' health care, as they are both my top priority. In 1970, RNSB established the Rama Navajo High School, the first Indian community school governed by an all-Indian locally controlled school board. Our efforts were a model for the groundbreaking of 1975 Indian Self-Determination Act, later Tribally Controlled Schools Act of 1988. In 1987, we established the healthcare services under the Indian Self-Determination Act. Currently, the Rama Navajo community in New Mexico, RNSB operates Pine Hill Schools K through 12. These schools are funded by BIE and the Tribally Controlled Schools Act. In this location, we also operate a FACE program, a Head Start program, as well as a Pine Hill Health Center in our behavioral health services and social service programs under the Indian Self-Determination Act. I would like to begin to express my appreciation to Congress for funding our school replacement construction for our dilapidated schools. I would also like to express our appreciation to Representative Gabe Vasquez for introducing the bipartisan legislation to extend the federal employee retirement system benefits to the teachers and staff of the tribally controlled schools, because it helps us recruit and retain staff, recruitment and retention of our staff. Our most pressing concern stems from the lack of equal funding to provide critical health care and educational programs to our tribal community, inadequate and uncomfortable and yes, in our dangerous facilities. To begin with the BIE budget, we're seeking at least $950 million for the ISEP formulation funds account, the core BIE account for which our school operates. When BIE does not request an increase for ISEP, it means that we do not have the budget to compete with teachers' salaries and benefits being offered by the state of New Mexico and also BIA-operated schools. Without equal funding, we continue to struggle to attract and retain quality teachers. Without quality teachers, we cannot offer our students any quality education. We ask that Congress continue to hold BIE accountable, ensuring that the amounts requested for educational personnel pay parity in the BIE budget are sufficient to match the increase provided by the Defense Department schools and are clearly calculated and identified for each tribal school. We also need a parity when it comes to the benefits we can offer our teachers and staff. We noted that while tribal controlled schools and BIE operated schools are both part of the BIE funded school system, it is not only the teachers and the staff in those BIE schools who are eligible to receive the FERS benefits. This inconsistently puts tribally controlled schools like ours in a significant disadvantage and has effects of undermining the intent of Congress in the Indian Self-Determination Act and the tribally controlled schools. Full forward funding for our school facility operations and school facilities management is long overdue. Our facilities accounts are 51%. Our facilities accounts are only 51% funded. Because of these two core operations accounts are not forward funded, we consistently have to move money from our schools' forward funding accounts to cover our monthly utility bills and ongoing maintenance costs. Sometimes we do not receive our facilities funds until the end of the school year. Furthermore, significant improvements needed to Maximo, which the facilities management software at the Department of Interior uses. The Maximo software creates a barrier in reporting and deficiencies in funding for the projects needed at our school. For Indian Health Services, we need a full mandatory funding. We support the IHS Tribal Budget Formulation Group recommendation of $54 million for IHS. Unfortunately, the inadequate funding levels that are appropriate in the IHS year after year translates that the average per capita spending on healthcare several times less than the average per capita healthcare spending for the general population. The results that the Native people are disproportionately affected by preventable conditions. As related matter, we are seeking additional supplemental resources to recover from the effect of COVID, to protect against the next pandemic and address the opioid epidemic. Because of the chronic underfunding for public health infrastructure, the tribal communities are far less equipped to respond to the COVID pandemic. As a result, with higher rates of disease incidence and mortality in the general public. The funding that Congress did appropriate for the response to COVID-19 tribal communities was immediately used for good use. We are concerned if another pandemic were to occur, none of these underlying disparities will be changed. We are also ill-equipped to address any rapid worsening opioid epidemic, a national problem with devastating impacts. Thank you for the opportunity to raise these pressing priorities and explain how the national policies and funding decisions directly impact tribal communities like ours.
your testimony and pointing out the 6-year graduation rate. And sometimes people can hear 6 years and think, oh, they're not doing their job, it's not 4. 6 is not unusual anymore. It's becoming extraordinarily commonplace for first generation, for working families who are trying to get their students through school, through students who have family obligations, sometimes an elder, or helping out with childcare back home. And then you add to it the transportation issues that many of these students have to do and the cycle in which classes are offered. So 6 years is not all that unusual. Congratulations. They're finishing. That's great, because some students just kind of have to go, not full-time, but 3/4 time or part-time, especially returning adults. I think that's fabulous news. And I just wanted, for the record, for anybody who's out there listening saying, well, 6 years, you're average. Good job. I wanted to follow up on a conversation that the chair and I and the ranking member were present for earlier, and you pointed it out, Ms. Rose, about students graduating from colleges, tribally colleges, staying in the community. So one of the conversations that we had in the school that came up was Morehouse, holding slots for Native American students. So we need to do that not just in healthcare, but we need to do that in engineering and things like that. So HBCUs have been funded well. They're still underfunded. This committee's been great. I work on them, but when you get the HBCUs, the historically black colleges, up and running, all of a sudden research dollars and more opportunities and everything become involved. So this is a multiplying effect, investing in tribal colleges. Could you tell me if you have any conversations, either tribe with tribes, about what to do about creating slots, working with people that will do the master's degree or help support classes for someone at a tribal college online who's interested in engineering? What are we doing that's creative? And I know that's going to cost more money, but what are some of the ideas that are out there that maybe we should be thinking of? We did them pretty successfully with HBCUs with more to do. But what are some of the ideas that you have out there, and some of the things you're hearing from your high school students with graduation, like really opening up their minds for all the different kinds of jobs and possibilities, not being limited by their geography?
I can jump in to start the conversation, if that's okay. I actually want to highlight the CHIPS Act, because I think the CHIPS Act is a really good place to show where partnerships with private business and industry have created alliances with our tribal colleges and universities. So we have a Dene College and Navajo Technical University that are going to start working with Intel right in the development of the jobs that will be in place, including not only the jobs within the building, but the construction jobs as well. But I want to highlight that sometimes when we have these unique ideas, there's obstacles in the way that we're not aware of. And I think IHS is a really good example of this. We have a huge amount of nurses that we could begin placing within the hospitals, but IHS has a requirement that they will not take new nurses. They have to have 1 year of training or practice before they can go into the hospitals. We don't have any place to send for that 1 year training program, so they have to leave the community. And leaving the community, they might lose their home, because the home cannot sit empty for 1 year as they leave. They might not have transportation to get back, and they might not come back to the community after that because of our salaries. So we're working with IHS right now to identify solutions, and we would really appreciate the committee's support, because we do have creative ideas and opportunities, but we end up finding obstacles, such as Gila River's obstacle with their 1 year grant program.
If I may just add, just continued support for college and technical education, whether they're CTE programs, Carl Perkins grants, and any forms of, I'm really thankful for State of New Mexico has created an innovation grant that mirrors a little bit of a College Perkins and has allowed tribally controlled schools to access the funding. A lot of times, many of this funding is earmarked to whether they're to states or public schools, and we kind of forget about the 189 BIE funded schools that need additional support to help that career college readiness supports. We at Navajo Prep, we invest a ton in ensuring that our students are exposed to all colleges, whether they're the tribal colleges, our local colleges, and of course, just applying for the Common App and exposure. I know we have a great relationship with College Horizons, who is a specific organization that helps Native students apply for colleges. And so it's just and the more that we can, fund it, the more creative as administrators and schools, we are willing to be creative as much as funding we do receive.
Miigwech for that question. I happen to work for the American Indian Science and Engineering Society, and so we know STEM fields are a huge workforce need right now outside of Indian country, but also within it. And tribal colleges offer an opportunity for students to stay in their community and work for their tribal nations or entities within. But at our tribal schools, if their construction is not fully funded, if they don't have heating and air, they certainly do not have the technology to support the fields that are needed for this area. We can't teach STEM without that technology. And right now, students don't even have heating and air because of this lack of construction funding. So we'd love to see these basics pieces be funded so that we could then focus on what the century needs for the workforce and for our tribal communities.
Thank you for the question. We at RNSB, we help our students by transporting them to a local community college about 60 miles out. We do dual credits, so that's how many we take them back and forth. We had to purchase vehicles just to do that specific task. We also are gifted and talented and upward bound, which helps our students also advance into college, and that's how we usually try to provide as much assistance as we can. We also have reached out to various different universities. We have take them there from our school as field trips to go to all these different schools to try and get as much introduction to college as we can for them, and that's what we've been doing on our part.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Miigwech.
Turner, let me ask you, do you guys use TRIO much? TRIO programs? You mentioned Upward Bound.
That's done more in the high schools, isn't it?
Public? Is that a public school? I am not familiar. I'm not familiar.
It's a program that exists in Labor H, in the Labor H bill. I'm the co-chairman of the House TRIO caucus, and what it does is help prepare first-time students that have never had any relationship with going to college, never even thought about it, prepare them to go to college while they're in high school, and then help them once they get in college of how to deal with going to college. And I always, when I got involved in this program, it was kind of, when I grew up, you went to grade school, to junior high school, to college. You just kind of went from one to the other and stuff. And I never realized there were an awful lot of students that never thought about going to college because they don't have any relationship with that. Their parents didn't go to college, they don't have brothers and sisters, nobody in the community. And it has been an amazing program in helping students prepare for going to college and what they're going to face there, and then deal with that when they get there and stuff. So, and I know oftentimes it's for minority communities. In the South, it's used a lot by black students. In Idaho, it's Hispanic students a lot, and we do have some tribal members from the Fort Hall Reservation and stuff that are active in it too. So I would encourage you to start looking at that program of how it might be able to be helpful. Go ahead.
Absolutely, and I I used to be the tribal education director for my tribe, and so I am familiar with TRIO as it's used in our public schools, and some of our Native students do participate in that. And in my experience, the best case scenario is when students have access to programs like TRIO, but in addition, Johnson O'Malley, that is also supporting that cultural instruction, and support from their tribal education agency, which is providing that specific tribal support too. So TRIO can be a wonderful, wonderful mechanism, but those other pieces are important too to be able to provide that specific cultural and tribal support.
Mr. Chair, if I just might add, I'm glad you brought TRIO up. TRIO is primarily, I would say, and I will check with my tribal nations back home in Minnesota, because I'm going to kind of refer to them in general, but this is what I've witnessed in my office and back at home in the district. TRIO's used in the public schools, where the students are going to the public schools in the metropolitan area. When I get out to Leech Lake, White Earth, Fond du Lac, Net Lake, they don't have a TRIO coordinator. It's a tribal school in most cases. And so I don't think the tribal schools have probably reached out to TRIO, because it's just another thing that the schools have to invest in when we're underinvesting so much. So I'm going to ask our tribal leaders back home about how that's used. But I just want, once again, just think we've got land-grant institutions that should be doing slots, working where there's tribes in there. And a big shout out to Morehouse and HBCU reaching out to another underserved population, the First Americans. I have a lot of Morehouse constituents too.
Thank you all for your testimony today. We'll certainly take it into consideration. We'll try and put together a budget, but appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, we have panel 17, Cecilia Fire Thunder, Troy Lunderman, and Ryan Wilson.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, members of the committee, and Congresswoman McClellan. My name is Cecilia Fire Thunder. I am the president of the Oglala Lakota Nation Education Coalition, representing 6 tribally controlled schools on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. I'm also the president of one of the tribal controlled schools, Little Wound School. I am here to request your support for full funding for Bureau of Indian Education funded schools. I am going to be addressing some key issues that are of great concern. My written testimony you will have. I want to spend this time just focusing on 2 or 3 items. In my written testimony, we have included graphs to show visually what our concerns are. We've been able to go back 20 years to take a look at the shortfalls that we have been experiencing, just to tell the story that this has been an ongoing challenge for many of our tribal schools to get the necessary funds and resources we need to operate our schools in a good way. ISEP, the Indian School Equalization Program, are the largest single source of federal dollars for our tribal schools. ISEP funds are intended for teacher salaries, classroom supplies, textbooks, extracurricular activities, field trips, sports, and related programming. However, according to the BIE, ISEP does not assess the actual cost of school operation. As a result, BIE schools remain severely underfunded, especially when compared to other federally funded programs. For example, On the Pine Ridge Reservation, we have 13 schools. We have 4 public schools, 6 297 schools, 1 BIA school, and 2 parochial Catholic schools. One of the things that we see as we're looking and comparing salaries and operating monies, there is a discrepancy. The public schools are getting the state-funded dollars. On top of that, they get impact aid. And most of the JOM monies go to the public schools, and the tribal schools get very little of the JOM monies. So when we're looking at comparisons, so currently, ballpark figure, we're looking at 7,000 WSU per student for our tribal schools. And then for Pine Ridge, we're looking at 14,000 for the public schools. And so there is like a $7,000 discrepancy. That makes a big difference in what types of services we provide. The Department of Defense activity, so here again, the Department of Defense is like 25,000 per student. So across America, we see discrepancies in how schools are funded, off and on and off the reservation. Over the past 20 years, ISEP has slowly started to decrease because it is used to pay for other unfunded programs. Today, approximately 40% of ISEP funds are used to supplement facilities and other underfunded programs. School lunch, school construction, all of these are challenges that we face in our community. We are in dire need of urgent construction dollars, and one of the areas that all of our schools are helping each other with is how do we increase the construction funding. We have 88 schools on the replacement list, and our ISEP dollars are going to pay for additional costs in operation and maintenance, primarily because those buildings are so old, you can't keep them warm, and because they're so old, they're constantly needing some kind of upgrade in construction. I want to also talk about the school lunch program. ISEP, the Bureau of Indian Affairs does not pay for our school lunch. We get that out of CANS through the United States Department of Agriculture. Right now, we're using money out of ISEP to make up for our children's food because there's not adequate money. But here's the thing. Out of 8 employees in our kitchen, only 1 is paid by USDA, and we have to pick up the additional cost. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to support all the testimony that's been given here because we're all saying the same thing. And I hope that you are listening to us and hear our message. In conclusion, I am here. 156 years ago, a treaty was entered into with my people. And I am here to uphold the language of that treaty. Thank you.
Thank you. Troy?
Good morning, Chairman
Could
Simpson.
you pull that mic over by
Good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the committee. My name is Troy Lunderman. I'm the Human Resource Director and Director of Development for St. Francis Indian School, located in St. Francis, South Dakota on the Rosebud Sioux Reservation. I'm also a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. I'm also a member of tribal education. I went to tribally controlled schools. I've gone to public schools. I even spent time as the elementary years as the survival school in Minneapolis, a part of the earth that is no longer open. I carry post-secondary degrees of a bachelor's and also a CTE certificate. So I've gone both sides of the education there. So I'm here to request your full support for full funding for Bureau of Indian Education funded schools. Considering my written testimonial that I submitted, for the record, I want to spend this time focusing on 2 or 3 items. The first item I'd like to address is CTE schools. At St. Francis, we are interested in a career and technical education programs as alternative education for our youth. However, there is currently no federal funding for a CTE program under the BIE, and the only CTE funding for tribes is allocated under the Department of Education. And Congress appropriates only $16 million annually to the Department of Education's Perkins program for any tribal program. So we recently are in our first year of initiating our CTE program, and in the short time it's existed, we've seen huge turnarounds in attendance, where it's been cut in half, and also increases in 90% of the students' GPAs. I was a social worker prior to my job at St. Francis, my current job, and I've seen students that walked away from the school because they don't understand algebra, they don't understand different types of sciences and maths. where if CTE was available back then, this student in particular enjoyed being a mechanic. Different types of math, different types of science, that interest would have been there, he probably would have succeeded. To this day, to my knowledge, I know that student hasn't gone back to finish his high school education. And so, we also have seen grades improve significantly in some cases, from moving from Fs to some of them have made the honor rolls as well on CTE. So it's been huge growth in their GPAs like I talked about. When we talk about the history of Indian education, we talk about boarding school, we talk about Carlisle, but one thing we don't talk about is that there was a template of CTE that's actually never discussed. And it was the Chickasaw Nation in the 1820s with their school locations in Martin and I might tear this name up and I apologize, but Tokshish. And it was agriculture, and this was before their move to Oklahoma, so still in Mississippi area. That they had agriculture, ironworks, and things of that nature for their people already. But it's the school in Cane Creek that was brought by missionaries and had the boarding school where they moved 40 miles from the nearest Chickasaw resident or town that kind of modeled the boarding school era, and that's what gets discussed. So I, for one, would like to praise the Chickasaw Nation and give them their due that their tribe actually started the template for what could be considered CTE programs. Even in early reports of Carlisle, it's documented of students being excited in the afternoon programs where it was more hands-on classes than your general ed in the morning. There was no interest there. So a lot of these reports that I've read going back that CTE has had a template, has had an impact and an interest more than the general ed, and it's continued. And I think the numbers that we show, that we've testified for, still show that it's true today as well. The other issue I want to talk about, and Cecilia had mentioned it, is our lack of inadequate ISET funding, and it spills into other programs. And one we need is school resource officers. We have one this year, but you know, Rosebud Indian Reservation is in a rural, remote area where there is high traffic of illegal drugs passing through. St. Francis is in close proximity to the Nebraska border. We're actually 11 miles from the Nebraska border, where a lot of trafficking passes through the community. SROs are needed, but it's also hard to get because our police department is lacking as well. So it does feed into your education component as well as safety. What we're experiencing in our town is a lot of assaults, victimizing done in Nebraska, and these young ladies are being brought back to South Dakota side. And then you get into jurisdictional issues of state, tribal, and then the state of Nebraska. Ultimately, what happens is nothing gets done. These women end up, this becomes a part of their life that they have to deal with, and it's very unfair. So this year we do have a part-time. They're still considered a member of the Rosebud Police Department, so if there's any traffic calls in the area, they do have to leave their post and go do the traffic. What we've had was our numbers have dropped significantly. Last year, when we didn't have an SRO, we had 406 student incidents, which included wide range of violations, including alcohol, tobacco, weapons, violence, disorderly conduct. As of March 15th of this year, we've only had 169 student incidences. I also believe that number would be lower because when she does have to leave her post, that's when a lot of the incidences happen while she's off. If we could have one that's funded full-time to be at our school, would be great. There's also the impact of, it's just not a police presence, intimidation presence or whatnot. She engages the students. Our younger kids do feel safe. They tell her they feel safe. They tell us that they feel safe knowing that there's a cop there. Visiting them at recess time, visiting them in the hallways, her presence alone makes it feel safe. She's also talking to our older students on decision making that assaults, possessions, and things of that nature, as an adult, what it can do for your record and what it does. And that stuff I don't think gets talked about a lot. And at that age, when they are considered adults, I mean, we all know that simple decisions can change your life. And big difference from being 16, 17 to you're 18, 19 years old and in a school setting. And we don't want to set them up for failure on that. But again, our education funds are already severely limited. And Congress funds Indian students far less than non-Indian counterparts. Also in it is that we know that law enforcement is only funded at the 15% of the actual needs and the costs as well. So ISEP also funds our lunch program. But again, it's just another hand in that cookie jar for our kids as well too. So in closing, I'd like to say thank you for the time. I appreciate you guys having me here and be to testify. But the other thing though is I know the Secretary of Interior last week testified on the allocations that are under contract. And I know that the BIE was only at 35%, and these allocations were made in 2020. So if you're looking at BIE and looking at schools, you figure that these kids were starting or ending 8th grade the year these monies were allocated. They'll be graduating here in a couple weeks. How much better of an experience, how much more ready could they have been had more than 34% of funds been allocated in the interior as well. With that, I know, am I with my time?
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Brian.
Chairman Simpson, thank you. Chairman Simpson, thank you again for your service here, and Congresswoman McCollum, ho to you and the staff as well. It's good to see some familiar staff, and some have been around for a number of years. It's important to us as well. We build that relationship with them. I'm Ryan Wilson, Oglala Lakota, and president of the National Alliance to Save Native Languages. And our ask this year is $20 million for the Bureau of Indian Affairs Living Languages program. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. It's been going on now since 2020 out of economic development, and they have almost 19 tribes on there now, but there's dozens and dozens of more tribes that want to be a part of that too, so we're trying to up that appropriation. The other one is $5 million for the Bureau of Indian Education, specifically for immersion programming in Bureau schools. So I'm not here to bash BIE or anything, but they commingle language programs with immersion. So an example is they might have a fluent speaker. You know, my sister here is a fluent speaker, run a couple hundred kids through their classroom in a day in 50-minute sessions. Nobody's learning any language in those types of atmospheres. We're talking, we'd like you guys to kind of tighten up the language on that, specific just for immersion within the schools. So that's the request. You'll be hearing later from the president of the Native American Church in North America, and we're endorsing the $5 million request for peyote habitat conservation. Why that's part of my testimony, we've, this language effort, we've always couched it as supporting academic benefits as well, but the truth of the matter is there's so much more than that. Like you were saying, the multiplier effect. So when we get into free exercise issues, there is no free exercise of our ceremonies and religions in Indian country without our fluency too. And a lot of people say, well, you can't talk about religion, you can't talk about your ceremonies because of, our separation of church and state. But this is a legitimate exercise of your plenary power over Indian affairs to help out some of these opportunities to remove barriers to free exercise. And we believe it doesn't violate Establishment Clause. So this language is a key piece of that. And in that tradition, as I do every year, I wanted to give you another book. And this one's not out of print, so it's modern, but this is a wonderful wet plate edition. And these are modern tribal people that are still walking the earth here. This isn't, ancient history, but Secretary Howland is in this book too, picture of her, and we want the committee to have this.
Thank you.
And I know you're an avid reader, but share it with everybody. It's and it'll be the easiest book you read. It's mostly, yeah. Not that reading's hard for you, but
sometimes it is.
Yeah. So why I appreciate what you guys do so much. It's so educational for the members, but for us as well. So I was sitting here all day yesterday, and we get a little ethnocentric sometime and just think about our own tribe, and some of our tribes have individuals that only think about themselves too, and like all communities. To hear what everybody's saying, it's just fascinating to us. And so the conversations yesterday about buffalo restoration, about salmon restoration, and some people talking about food as medicine, Ranking Member Pengri, medicine is in danger everywhere, and this is directly impacting our health as well. And for us, if you don't have these medicines, you don't have your way of life or your ceremony as well. So this is why we were talking about the conservation. And when Ron Allen was mentioning co-management and taking over the refuge and things of that nature, this is where we need to move also into private-public partnerships on conservation to get access to sacred sites, to medicines like peyote that are on private land. And so with that in mind, I wanted to, you have my written testimony, but I also wanted to ask Chairman unanimous consent that you can accept these documents as well. And this is more language support from various tribes, but also support for conservation and what we're trying to do, the various tribes.
Sure, without objection.
And as I wind down, I'm going to read this here. It says, this is the 45-year-old American Indian Religious Freedom Act. It says, resolved by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that henceforth it shall be the policy of the United States to protect and preserve for American Indians their inherent right to freedom and beliefs, express and exercise the traditional religions of the American Indian. It's your trust obligation. So you hear about this obligation. It's your trust corpus also, and language is a piece of that. So when we develop our methodologies of measurable trust standards, this is a piece of that as well. And so I want to pass this along with you also, and we're celebrating the 45 years, and we want you to put in the report language a review of the administration's implementation of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. That doesn't cost any money. So let's get that in there. I asked that last year, didn't make it in there, but I'm back again to ask that we do that, especially on this anniversary. Thank you for your time. And I really want to thank you as well. I know I'm over time, but you know, when we started this language movement, you weren't here when I mentioned this last year because you were doing other meetings, but we had $1.5 million that all these tribes and Micronesia, Polynesia were competing for competitive grants. We've come a long ways, Congresswoman, and I want to keep that momentum going. Just say that little bit.
Well, thank you all for your testimony today. I think preserving native languages is vitally important to preserving tribes' history and everything. So I've been out to the reservation in Fort Hall and went to some of their immersion classes and a few things like that. It's fascinating to sit and listen to. I wish I had time to sit there and actually learn something, but to watch these young students learning the Bannock language and so forth. But I think that's a vital part of maintaining tribal integrity and stuff. So appreciate it. Betty?
Ms. Pingree is taking another meeting. She serves on the appropriations portion of the Department of Ag. And as we said yesterday, tribes are impacted in so many of the other appropriation processes. So I know she has great staff here, but I'm also going to put a bug in her ear that we figure out kind of what's going on with the school lunch program there. Full disclosure, my son's a linguist, so languages are important, and I hear other reasons why they're really important in saving languages. So we've got the Esther Martinez, we've got Save America's Languages, we have another language program. Do we need to work with you to harmonize to make sure that roles, regulations, funding, you mentioned the thing about the immersion schools. Do we need to work with you to get some feedback to talk to the Bureau to make sure that the money's going in the right lanes for these programs and that there's a way for all these lanes to merge to make everything stronger? Or do you think that it's going okay? I mean, I heard what you said about immersion schools.
Yeah, we have Department of Education also has a program in the Indian Education Act for immersion. But I mean, I'm happy to work with your staff, Rebecca, about that, and we could talk about it as well. BIE has that one piece, and then the living languages is new, and they just, you know, I think they're doing a good job. They just need more tribes having an opportunity to do that. But the part of it is, you know, what you're saying is we follow the same things. You know, create the opportunity and they're all competitive grants. And when you say harmonize, though, for so long we were discriminated against because of No Child Left Behind and state standards and assessments and a lack of waivers. So that's why it was really important to get that immersion piece in the Indian Education Act as well. And they go through the same thing in the Bureau-funded schools. And that's what needs to be harmonized, and that would real tribal control. And we have a lot of good ideas for that. You know, we'd love to work with your staff on.
Work with the committee staff as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for being here today and for your testimony. Thank you for the book. I appreciate it very much. Next panel is panel 18, Lloyd Miller, Dr. Grussing, and Nicholas Lovesey.
Shelley wanted to see it.
I thought you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You bet. You're sneaking me sugar highs.
Keep it going.
Let's see which one I like. How you doing? I was going to say it can't really be called candy because it's
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Pingree, Congresswoman McCollum. It's been many years since I was here. Our testimony has been presented in the past, in recent years, by tribal leaders, Linda Austin last year, Melanie Forkiller before that. With your indulgence, I just want to make note that my partner, Harry Saxe, passed. He spent 60 years as a giant in the field of federal Indian law, argued successfully many Indian law cases to the United States Supreme Court because he was in the Solicitor General's office, and I offer my testimony today in his honor. The National Contract Support Costs Coalition was formed in the 90s to champion contract support cost issues. As the committee is well aware, the Indian Self-Determination Act cannot work without the tribal overhead costs being reimbursed. The reason for that is that without tribal overhead costs being reimbursed, tribal overhead has to come out of the program. So when the tribe steps into the shoes of the Indian Health Service, it ends up with less money than the Indian Health Service had. So this is the great equalizer, contract support costs. And the same is true for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It took years for us to establish in the courts that the Indian Health Service was violating the act as framed by Congress. Congress had promised the tribes that these would be binding contracts, but the agencies would only come to this committee and request partial payment. And it took the Cherokee Nation case that I argued in 2005 and our RAMA case in 2012 before finally the agencies agreed that these contracts needed to be paid in full for the reimbursement of the overhead costs. And this committee did a spectacular job coming up with a good solution, an indefinite appropriation account, a separate account, but it continues to provide pressure, I know, on the budget. I'm going to address that in a moment. But one thing that the Indian Health Service in particular did not do is it did not acknowledge that when it runs a healthcare program, that program is funded partially, thanks to the appropriations from this committee, but in very substantial measure from Medicare and Medicaid receipts, very substantially. According to IHS, some of their service units, 2/3 are funded by Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, and only 1/3 funded by this committee. So the program a tribe steps in to take over is that program. And the tribe takes it over, and it too is running a program that might be 2/3 funded with those revenues. Their overhead is larger. Well, their overhead is as large as necessary to run that program. But the Indian Health Service for years has said, no, we will only reimburse 1/3 of your overhead because only 1/3 of your program is funded with appropriations. And this is a decision that IHS made after the Supreme Court decided the RAMA case in 2012. IHS had a series of work group meetings, and in 2016 they issued a new manual, and they noted in the manual there was this area of disagreement, and they resolved that disagreement against the tribes. That same year, a court in New Mexico ruled that their approach to this issue was wrong. blame me. I understand recently IHS has been blaming me because that was another case that I litigated. That case in 2016, that issue in that case in 2016 became the case that I argued last month, March 25th, the San Carlos Apache tribe case. And if the Supreme Court resolves that case this month or next month against the Indian Health Service, there's going to be a reckoning of the remainder of the contract support cost that needs to be paid. I watched with interest the testimony by the director of IHS, and she committed to having a tribal consultation process and an aggressive process should the decision go that way. That's important because the agency has not been fully disclosing, has not been candid with the courts about how much this is going to cost. The agency has tried to scare the court into ruling against the tribes by saying that there'll be a $2 billion bill to pay. I think the agency is confusing judgments that may be awarded against the agency, which don't come out from this committee's appropriation, comes from the judgment fund. Well, it always has. It always has. The agency reported that just shy of $1 billion has been paid over the years in damages to tribes for underpayment of contract support costs, and those go back into the 90s and certainly throughout the 2000s. None of that was covered by this committee. But we do need some honesty. The Supreme Court asked, one of the justices asked, are you serious about the $2 billion? Are you just limiting your estimates to services to Indians? Well, no, we haven't. Well, what is the right number? Well, we don't know. So one of our recommendations from us is to recommend that the General Accountability Office facilitate this estimating process so that this committee has solid numbers. I remember, and both of you were on the committee at the time, of course, that the numbers jumped up and down massively after the Rama case. At that time, they said we need $1 billion. Well, they didn't need $1 billion. They needed about 800 million, 700 and change. And then they were too low, and then they were too high again. So there's something wrong in the estimating, and I think the General Accountability Office would bring some discipline to the process. But most importantly, on that issue, we need a mandatory appropriation. With your permission, I'd like to make it part of the record. It should have been attached to my testimony, but the attachment was missing when the email came in, it went out and came into your office. So that's language modeled on the Children's Health Insurance Program, which is statutory language to make the provision mandatory and get it out of your table and into somebody else's table. So long as the contract support cost remains with this committee, which is surely going to be the case in fiscal year 25, there is bill language that is inconsistent between the BIA and the IHS. And we also attached last year, I want to provide it to the committee again this year, language that would reconcile the two provisions. The Indian Health Service, you surely noticed that they're seeking additional language that would permit a takeaway of $10 million for administering the contract support cost account. They usually do that out of direct operations, but now they want an additional $10 million. And I think one of the reasons that's driving this request, although they don't explain it, is the language that the committee has included in the past. The language the committee has included says that once contract support cost payments are made to a tribe, they have to be used for contract support costs only, and if there's an underpayment, the agency owes more. If there's an overpayment, the tribe can transfer that to the next year and can still be used on contract support costs. But that means that the agency has to undertake an auditing process each year. Only they can't do the auditing process because you have to have a tribal audit, and the year is upon you. So this fiscal year will end September 30. October 1, they have to know what the answer to this question is. How much did you not spend? But they don't know themselves because their audit has to be done. It won't be done until next June or July or August at best. And then they need to get a new indirect cost rate. And the indirect cost rate that they had that was provisional has to be finalized. The numbers have to be cranked. This can take 2 years. It can take 3 years. IHS is taking up to 6 years to finalize these numbers. And this explains why they have such a contract monitoring bureaucracy. This is not what the BIA does. The BIA signs a contract with the tribe, pays the $100,000, whatever it is, to the tribe, case closed, let's move on to the next year. If it was too little, and it's significantly too little, the tribe is always free to file a claim. If it's too much, the tribe uses that money to carry out the contract. They have to use it under the contract, so they provide additional services. The BIA system is much simpler, doesn't require $10 million to administer, and if the committee changed the structure of that language, the IHS would not have a need for $10 million. There are continued to be extraordinary payment delays by the BIA. Some tribes have even asked that the committee do something I'm sure the committee would want to do, which is to establish a statutory penalty on any BIA employee who fails to make a timely payment to the tribe. I mention it only because it reflects the gravity of the problem. There really is a tremendous impatience with that. The other issues I addressed in the testimony, and I've already taken too much time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Larry. I appreciate it. Dr. Dressing?
Thank you for this opportunity, Chair Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and Congresswoman McCollum, and members of the subcommittee. I appreciate this opportunity to present our testimony. The National Association of Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, that's NAHPO, recommends for fiscal year 25 appropriations. My name is Valerie Grusing. I'm the organization's executive director. Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, also known as THPOs or TIPOs, and our partners, the State Historic Preservation Officers, are the backbone of our nation's efforts to preserve and protect the places and resources that tell the story of our country. TIPOs are officials designated by federally recognized tribal governments to protect culturally important places that perpetuate Native identity, resilience, and cultural endurance. TIPO's work is grounded in tribal sovereignty, traditional knowledge, and cultural values. I strongly encourage the committee to provide $34 million for the tribal line item portion of the Historic Preservation Fund for fiscal year 25. The tribal line item in the HPF is the sole source of dedicated federal funding for TIPOs. The current $23 million for the tribal line item is the same amount as was allocated in fiscal year 23. Providing TIPOs with the same amount that they received in the past fiscal year is not level funding for them because of both an increase in the TIPO workload and the number of TIPOs. Laws such as the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law have led to a significant increase in the number of federal projects on which TIPOs are required to consult. While the burden on TIPOs increases, the annual amount that they receive declines because each year approximately 10 more tribal nations successfully go through the process to establish a THPO office. While the funding for the tribal line item stayed at $23 million from fiscal year 23 to 24, over the year, the number of TIPOs increased from 211 to 222, and that number is going to continue to go up by that amount each year. The combination of no increase in funding while the number of TIPOs increased has resulted in the average amount of funding that each TIPO receives declining from $108,000 to $104,000. That's about one whole staff member, and that's an increase from fiscal year 22, where it was about $77,000. So they've just gotten used to having one whole staff member, and we can't go back from that. They wear many hats, so that's not meeting the trust responsibility. There is great value in the federal projects that Congress has created in recent years, and the establishment of TIPOs by tribal nations is an act of sovereignty which must be encouraged, but these actions need to be accompanied by an increase in funding for TIPOs. A failure to increase TIPO funding results in unnecessary delays for important projects and the potential damage or destruction of tribal nations' cultural resources and sacred places. I've spoken a lot about budgets and statistics, but as I just suggested, and as committee members know, the implications of a failure to fund TIPOs is about much more than the bottom line on a balance sheet. Chair Simpson, you are well aware of this based on your coordination with TIPOs on efforts to remove dams along the lower Snake River. The salmon, whose numbers have declined because of those dams, are an important cultural resource for tribal nations in Idaho and other states in the Pacific Northwest. Similarly, Ranking Member Pingree, TIPOs in Maine have been involved in efforts to restore the Penobscot River and the Atlantic salmon and sturgeon. Tribal nations have depended on these fish and the rivers that sustain them since time immemorial. And Congresswoman McCollum, I know that you know all too well about the invaluable work that TIPOs in Minnesota perform as well, including language revitalization.
As important as the restoration of culturally important places and the preservation of species that are central to tribal nation stories is, the work that TIPOs do is fundamentally about much more than that. At its core, TIPO's work is about addressing the epidemics in Indian country that are the symptoms of historical trauma, of people systematically cut off from their families, languages, practices, and ultimately lands. Everything comes from the land, right, including language, and then all of our identity and framework comes from language, as you know. Reconnecting Native peoples to their cultural heritage, traditions, and places has the power to help heal deep generational wounds. Treating the cause, that is the work that TIPOs do. And to continue this work in Indian country, it is essential that TIPO programs receive increased funding to meet the increasing need. Besides the consultation work that they do to protect and preserve tribal nations' cultural resources and sacred places, many TIPOs also engage in the repatriation of ancestors and important belongings. I strongly urge the committee to provide $12.4 million for NAGPRA, that's the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which, like TIPO funding, is part of the Park Service budget. The need for this work has far outstripped the funding levels that have been provided in recent years. And the new changes to the regulations place even more of that burden on tribes, which is a good thing. It's all going in the direction of exerting sovereignty, but that has to come with increased funding. Thank you for considering NAPO's testimony, and more importantly, thank you for your commitment to supporting tribal nations' efforts to protect the places and cultural resources that tell their nation's stories and allow them to heal and flourish. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Don. Nicholas.
Thank you so much. Before I get started, I just want to echo the importance of the contract support cases. Before NFOA has filed an amicus brief on the San Carlos Apache case, and this is something that's really important going forward. Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, Congressman McCollum, and members of the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Interior, Environment, and related agencies. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. My name is Nicholas Lovesey. I'm the Director of Policy for the Native American Finance Officers Association, and today I'm here to advocate for important changes to tribal programs within the Department of Interior, as well as broader recommendations for the administration's handling of tribal initiatives. NFOA represents over 160 tribes located around the United States, from Alaska to Florida, Idaho, Minnesota, Nevada, Texas, all around. We're currently in an important transitional time for Indian country and for federal funding in general. With the country moving on from COVID, we're transitioning from a period of incredibly high federal spending back to more normal levels. In addition to battling the global pandemic, legislation such as CARES and the ARPA helped address some previously unfunded and in some cases entirely left behind mandates. This unprecedented spending has been a boon for many tribes, but now we need to make sure that as the spending recedes, it doesn't turn into a burden. First, we request that a number of programs currently funded under the discretionary classification be changed to mandatory funding. Maybe the easiest, though least helpful request I could ever make is to simply ask to return to a normal appropriation/funding cycle. I don't need to tell anyone here that the consistent, continuing resolutions and shutdowns have had a major negative impact on the way tribes operate on a number of different issues. Reclassifying programs would help tribes with financial planning and make budget forecasting far more accurate, something that's very important to business development for tribes. One example would be the contract support costs and payment for tribal leases. Both this year and last year's president budgets have called for the reclassification of these programs, and Senate Report 1883 has outlined why it's important to do so. To address other problems, funding needs to be made available, and authorizing changes need to be attached to ensure that all tribal programs, grants, loan opportunities, and more have across-the-board technical assistance to help answer the questions that the tribes and tribal entities have. In September of last year, NFOA testified before the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs, stating another major issue is the lack of technical assistance that the IRS and Treasury can offer to tribes. And major authorizing changes need to be made so that they can answer the questions the tribes actually have. I just came back from the NFOA conference a couple weeks ago, and one of the issues we hear over and over again since COVID has been about applying and accessing different programs. The feeling in Indian country is that there are many wonderful funding sources available, but it feels almost like there's a glass wall in front of them, and they're hard to access. One of the great examples of federal assistance and outreach is the Office of Tribal and Native Affairs, OTNA, at the Department of Treasury. They currently have a budget of $2 million and employ 8 staff, and they've had a real outsized impact on how they've been able to help tribes answer their questions and reach out. However, it's not a permanent authority and relies now on continuing appropriations each year to be funded. So if that can be moved into the permanent, that would be really helpful across the board. Next, there needs to be a strong investment in tribal business and economic development programs. At the Department of Interior, the Indian Loan Guarantee Program is another example of a successful program that needs more support. The amount of loans the amount that the loans have increased dramatically over the past few years. And since the program constantly reaches its maximum lending authority, this dramatically then reduces the amount that the number of loans that can be offered. The ILGP has been a major economic benefit for tribes of all sizes across the board and helped establish credit, which in turn fuels even more growth and creates new opportunities that would otherwise not be available. Additionally, the program does not currently interact with the New Market Tax Credit. This is an unnecessary limitation on the good work the ILGP can do and is currently doing. And frankly, it's about kind of leveling the playing field. It's not about tribes having more, it's about leveling the playing field. Lastly, it's another example of the inconsistent funding and continuing resolutions. Temporary COs only fund part of the ILGP lending authority. This creates a situation where banks either don't make a loan due to only partial availability of funds, or they have to assume the risk, just hoping that there's going to be a CO for the rest of the year. We have a number of specific programs that we support increases for in the written testimony. Thank you very much, and if there's any questions, I remain available.
Sorry to have missed much of your testimony, but I appreciate very much you being here today. Thank you so much.
I think we're going to have to go to school on Medicaid and Medicare because that's mostly in the tax preview. But you were talking about having the GAO look at it. I'm kind of wondering why the Bureau has to pay for administrative costs under Medicaid and Medicare. Shouldn't they be paying or taking the burden off the tribe for doing it? I mean, there's dollars that go into that. That's mandatory. We all pay into it. Mm-hmm. And so I can see, I'm not an attorney, but I could see where the Bureau would say, no, we take care of our portion, Medicaid and Medicare for their payment for any administration. They should take care of theirs. Could you tell me briefly, without confusing me too much, because I'm going to have to read the GAO report when it comes out, why that doesn't work? Or did Medicaid or Medicare refuse to do it?
No, it's not that at all. And it's not the Bureau, it's the Indian Health Service, of course. I suppose your question is Indian Health Service versus CMS, which manages the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Which is mandated, right. And it's their funds that are being used for the patient.
Right. So the reason is this. It is only because of the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act that the funds that Medicare and Medicaid pays to the provider, the doctor, the hospital, it's only because of the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act, not general law, that money is then recycled and spent to provide care to Indian people. If a doctor provides care to a Medicaid patient, the doctor receives the funds, that goes into the doctor's income. The doctor can use that money for a child scholarship. Doesn't have to use the money he receives from Medicaid after serving the patient to do anything. But the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act imposes this additional obligation on Indian tribes or the Indian Health Service. So as a result of that, the Indian Health Service, their direct operations line item supports all of the services that they provide with that Medicare and Medicaid spending.
Well, that was an in my opinion, being present when some of this stuff happened, that's an unintended consequence, totally unattended consequence. Yep. And so I personally think that we should go back and get that fixed so Medicaid and Medicare take care of it, because there's so many other needs in Indian country that would take this out, because I don't see it being made mandatory.
Right.
So I look forward to the GAO report and then figuring out how to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you all for your testimony. I appreciate it very much. Very interesting.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Next panel, panel 19, and we're only about 15 minutes behind. So, that's not bad. Arena Martin, Chief William Smith, Todd Wilson, and John Bradley. Arena, you're up first.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Aureen Martin. Oh, can you hear me okay? I'm a low talker. Good morning, everyone. My name is Aureen Martin, and I'm a member of the Bad River Band of Ojibwe from Wisconsin. Go Pack. And I'm also a member of the National Indian Child Welfare Association Board of Directors. NICWA is a National American Indian Alaska Native organization with over 25 years experience in policy development related to Indian children and families. Our mission is twofold. One, we strive to support compliance with the Indian Child Welfare Act, and we also address issues of child abuse and neglect through training, research, policy, and community development. Before I get started with my comments, I want to thank the committee for their support of child welfare and social service programs over the last few years particularly. You've kept that funding on an upward trajectory, which hasn't always been the case, and so we truly appreciate that. At NICWA we know, and studies have shown, the surest way to reduce the flow of Native children into child welfare systems is to ensure that tribes have full capacity to protect their children and families, whether they're at home in foster care. Yet tribal child welfare programs remain seriously underfunded. Every year I come here and I make kind of the same 3 recommendations to you, and you've helped build up some of that funding, but they're always the same 3 programs. First, we recommend that Indian Child Protection and Family Violence Prevention Act programs be fully funded at $50 million. And that sounds like a lot, but that is the only federal direct funding for child abuse prevention and treatment that would go directly to tribes that's authorized by the federal government. At a minimum, we saw that this year the administration is recommending $7 million for those programs. We support that request. The other 2 programs that we always recommend full funding for are the ICWA on-reservation program, Child Welfare Services, and to have those fully funded at $30 million, and funding for off-reservation ICWA programs to be fully funded at $5 million. These funds are really designed to provide funding to tribes so that they can provide essential child welfare services. But the current funding amount is about $17 million, which means that even though almost every tribe receives this funding, more than 2/3 of tribes only receive about $30,000, which is not even enough to fund a position. And I actually worked in a tribal welfare program that doesn't even begin to cover it, right? The other program, ICWA Off-Reservation program, provides the same services as the on-reservation program, but in an urban setting. And these services are extremely important because nearly 70% of the Native American population lives in an urban area. So those numbers continue to rise. So the $1 million that's there now is just woefully inadequate. We are grateful because actually there was no funding for this until 2020, and you funded it at $1 million, but we're asking for the full $5 million for that. And I always come here with like dry statistics and numbers for you, but I wanted to share a really positive story about a tribe who's taken some of these smaller funding amounts and cobbled them together into a successful program. One of the tribes we work with is Port Gamble S'Klallam tribe in Washington State. And in 2012, they made a decision just to change the way things are working, take control of their own destiny. And so they entered into a direct program grant with HHS for Title IV-E program, for the Title IV-E program for foster care, guardianship, and adoption assistance. They also changed the culture on the reservation, the way they looked at services. They changed the messaging in the community to say that every family can use some support, and they destigmatize the seeking of support by families. They focus their tribal programs to provide family support for personal visits, for caregivers, to ask questions about raising children. They started group events that help caregivers meet and connect with other caregivers, and they created networks to help build support system among caregivers. These supports are available for grandparents, relative caregivers, and foster parents. The tribe also integrated child welfare services with many other tribal programs, including TANF, early learning, and adult and elder care, so that there was a seamless experience for families. The changes were extremely successful. In 2012, there were 60 child foster care cases at the tribe. In 2023, that number was down to 6. The successes of this approach show how tribes on the ground can design their own programs and be successful. So in conclusion, I just want to thank you for the time today, and I'd be happy to hear any questions you have.
Thank you. Todd. Yes, good morning. My name is Todd Wilson. I'm an enrolled member of the Crow Nation in southeastern Montana. I'm also a board member of the National Council of Urban Indian Health. It's a national representative of the 41 urban Indian organizations that contract with Indian Health Service under the Indian Healthcare Improvement Act. I am also the executive director of Helena Indian Alliance, Leopoldscha Memorial Clinic in Helena, Montana. We serve about 2,000 American Indian Alaska Native patients, including about 24 visits from your state, Idaho, Mr. Simpson. I want to thank you, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and Congresswoman McCollum for your time and attention, as well as the other committee members that weren't able to make it. We have several requests written in our testimony, so I'll take this opportunity to illustrate why overall increases have been beneficial to Native communities and the importance of protecting Indian Health Service through advanced appropriations and also protection from cuts. We fully support the tribal budget formulation work group request for the Indian Health Service at $53.85 billion for Indian Health Service and $965.3 million for urban Indian health. We must continue advanced appropriations while we work toward mandatory funding. This committee understands the federal government's trust obligation to provide health care to our Native people, no matter where they live. Our clinics provide essential health care services to patients from over 500 tribes and assist the U.S. government in fulfilling its trust obligation and responsibility to the Native people living in urban areas. Our boards are Native controlled board of directors, and we are to ensure that the health care providers that we have are run by Native people for the Native people. As you are well aware, while we're working tirelessly to provide high-quality care, decades of underfunding has contributed to significant health disparities in Indian country. Although our providers are great stewards of the funds they can access, it is not enough to care for the communities in the ways we deserve. We are grateful for the committee's protected IHS funding from cuts, and funding must be increased to keep up with inflation. As you know, as we do, level funding in this current climate is essentially like a budget cut. Our clinics have used these increases in the previous years to recruit better talent and retain providers, which is more critical than ever during the national healthcare workforce shortage. A clinic in one of our clinics reported that funding helped them increase services to hard-to-reach areas in their county, resulting in decreased suicides. We had a clinic in California who purchased Narcan with the funding to increase opioid awareness to prevent needless deaths. In Montana, at Helena Indian Alliance, we have a medication-assisted treatment clinic providing behavioral health services that have been invaluable to working to address the tragic effects of the opioid crisis. Unfortunately, limited funding has reduced our ability to address this crisis fully. The effects of inadequate funding are not limited to behavioral health, but affects all aspects of care. While we are working to provide for the needs of tribal citizens as best we can, we simply need more funding. Urban Indian organizations and Indian health care providers across the country face similar constraints.
which is why it's essential that the committee do all you can to bolster IHS. We ask that you continue to protect IHS from sequestration or budget cuts, and ask that our programs, which are already underfunded, cannot take any more funding restrictions and reductions without severe consequences. Our clinics reported that any cuts would translate into tribal citizens lacking access to care that UIOs would have limited resources to providing insulin for diabetics, counseling for survivors of violence, and oral surgery. Another way to protect IHS is to make sure we have stable funding by maintaining advanced appropriations. Advanced appropriations have transformed how we operate care. Before, we would wait 2 to 3, 4 times. We would get our funding in limited increments. We would do the CRs, and while we wait for the budget and the final spending package. With advanced appropriations, we're able to get that all in one shot, and we're able to plan for the year. In conclusion, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to testify. I'd like to reiterate the requests are essential to ensure that all Native people have access to life-saving health care. We stand by as a resource to support the federal government as you continue to work towards the obligations to maintain and improve the health care of American Indian and Alaska Natives. And we urge Congress to take this obligation seriously and provide the urban Indian organizations and IHS with all the resources necessary to protect the lives of the entirety of the Native population. Thank you. I'd like to leave you with these priorities from National Council of Urban Indian Health as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Chief Smith.
First of all, issue, hello, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingrees, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee. On behalf of the National Indian Health Board and the 574 sovereign tribal nations we serve, Awa'ata, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on the Presidential's fiscal year 2025 budget. Request for the Indian Health Service. My name is William Smith, i.e. Chief Bill of the Eyak people of Alaska. I serve as the chairman and the Alaska area representative for the National Indian Health Board. The Indian Health Service budget has little room for further growth in this current, as it currently exists. The Indian Self-Determination Education Assistance Act required IHS to compensate tribes for contract support costs in Section 105 leases, which means that these payments are legally mandated. Congress provides such funds as they may be necessary to meet these obligations, but continue to keep them in the discretionary budget. When increases are given to the Indian Health Service, the majority of these new funds goes to these two accounts, leaving other programs in the Indian Health Service budget flat funded. To realize this, that means that the Indian Health budget is shrinking. Congress intended for a contract support cost and the 105L lease payment to be mandatory when ISCA was first passed in 1975. The Supreme Court upheld these payments as mandatory obligations. This committee's own report has cited that this issue for nearly a decade and called on a solution, including reclassification of these accounts as mandatory. The Indian Health Service has also included this solution in their budget. In the fiscal year 2024, 105L leases increases by 34%, and the contract support cost increased by 8.5%, but the total increase over the Indian Health Service was less than 0.1%. For the first time, the Indian Health Service received budget cuts from services and facilities to fund the contract support costs and the 105L leases growth. The court is expected to soon rule on Becerra versus the San Carlos Apache tribes and the Northern Arapaho tribes, which could increase the obligations for contract support costs in the coming years. Under the current budget, it is not clear where these funds will come from for 2025. The Appropriation Committee, we have worked under the Fiscal Responsible Act budget cap, which will provide only 1% more funding for fiscal 24 for the entire federal budget. That's not even keeping up with inflation. Congress also reclassifies this account to simply come to an agreement on how to score them for the Budget Committee, Congressional Budget Office, and the Office of Management and Budget as officially scorekeepers. The time to move these costs to mandatory is now. The United States has trust responsibilities across all its healthcare agencies, but does not currently meet those commitments in most of the HHS divisions. Congress must provide these funds, but it will need to come much sooner than Congress anticipates. With continuous pressure on the Indian health budget from contract support systems, contract support cost, and the 105L leases. In conclusion, there is limited future for the Indian health if Congress does not move these contract support cost and Section 105L leases payments to mandatory appropriations. This subcommittee can break the cycle and be adequate. We thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony. And like I said, we're here to help remove the roadblocks. And I heard it was spoken earlier about Medicare, Medicaid, and Indian Health Service. And I was at one of these committee meetings, and they asked me, Chief Bill, do you really believe two federal agencies can work together? And I said, yes, because it's proven fact between the Indian Health Service and the VA. As you can tell, I'm a Vietnam vet, and I stand up for my veterans, and I stand up for Indian Health Service. So when I talk to Rosalind So, the head of the Indian Health Service, and talk to Dennis instead of the VA, I tell them it's time to get together and tear down our towers to work together. And that's what we need, especially with our languages and our cultures and everything else. We need to figure ways to remove these barriers. And here, as the chairman of the National Health Board, I'm here to work with you guys to make sure that we can do this. And if there's a roadblock that we can remove, if we can help, we'll be there.
I appreciate your optimism. We've been trying to work with the Department of Defense and VA for years, and sometimes it's hard to get them to work together because they all have their own way of doing things and stuff. But I appreciate your optimism in trying to get them to work together.
Well, creating the MOU and watching it today and seeing the teeth of it by being the reimbursement agreements, by being able to make sure that, like you said, Medicare paying their fair share and the deal, it makes it all go further because Alaska Natives and American Indians stand up for this country more than any other ethnic group. And when we say you need to work together, that's where it's coming from. It's coming from my heart.
Yep.
It's coming from the deal, and I will stand up and tell them that, and you can do it.
I appreciate it. John?
Hello, my name is John Brady. I just want to say thank you, Chairman Simpson and Ranking Member Pingree here in the subcommittee. I'm very happy and thankful here today on behalf of these past few days that you all got to bear witness our concerns as Native tribes. I know we could go on, you know, but nevertheless here, I'm here on behalf of our Mandan, Hidatsa, Wickawa people and our Native American Church of North America. I'm currently the president, and I'm here again, round two here. Hopefully things go in our favor here this time round. But nevertheless here, our way of life is in jeopardy, is a silent crisis. Our holy medicine, we call it Mabariwahuwa, and science calls it peyote. Botanists call it Lophophorua williamsii. So that's how wonderful our medicine is. It has so many names, you know. So here we are advocating. We're requesting $5 million in a conservation initiative demonstration project. You know, where Department of Interior will house that. They'll establish a committee, and all this medicine where it grows, it's only in 4 counties. It's a slow-growing cacti in Texas. And it's 8 to 10 years. It's ready to harvest. It's something you can't just plant in the spring and harvest in the fall. And this is our way of life. It's been carbon dated 10,000 years, this good, wonderful medicine. It's done a lot for us. And we have so much support, you know, since 1978, the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, you know, come around to help us as Native people to exercise our way of life, our prayer, our song, our dance. And then along the way in 1994, we thought we was constitutionally protected under that. And there was a case back in in the 90s. So 1994, there was a purity amendment specifically stating, this federally protected, and here we are today, but it's not protected where it grows in a natural habitat, and it's all private land. So this, if not only funded, but meaningful consultation that will help us for our futures, our generation. And I'm speaking on behalf of over 350,000 Native American church members from the north to the west to the east to the south to each corner of the nation, of our nation here. So this is something all new to us. We ain't trying to draw attention to ourselves. It's a real humble, sincere way of life. And with that being said, this ARFA, 1978 will be 45 years. And then 1994 amendments, it's going to be 30 years old. So and then we have Pioteros in the Texas where they're licensed through DEA, where all our membership, they go down there and they harvest this medicine. And we have a lot of support from National Congress, American Indians. We have about 3 resolutions supporting our efforts. We have Hobbs and Strauss. We have a lot of tribes that are supporting our efforts because they always tell us, do your tribe support it? Yes, they do. So with that being said, we have Rocky Mountain Tribal Leaders Council supporting our efforts, United Tribes of North Dakota. We have the United Nations of Oklahoma and Great Plains of Tribal Chairmen's Association. So along the way, we're just trying to shine light on the promises that was made in this ARFA. It's been like a law that's just been sitting there, collecting dust, and we're trying to make it come alive again. And we want our relatives to know, our elders to know that it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right, because life is tough as it is. And through all the natural laws that was instilled in all of us, no doubt every one of these individuals, these chairmen, these council people, in the morning they wake up, they made a prayer. They made a prayer maybe through tobacco or corn pollen or whatever it may be. We still uphold to our teachings and our ways and our customs. And it's sad to say that, we're still having to educate. We're still having to express how we feel. We're, our way of life, like as we speak, mainstream interests are trying to get in there and make our holy medicine synthetic, make it pill form, make it pharmaceutical. They're using our veterans again, saying it's going to be helpful to them, PTSD, all these kind of things. But we all know this medicine that has a good spirit. It has a healing when the doctors, this Western education, these big-time doctors give up on our relatives. What's the thing they depend on is prayer and this good holy medicine. People on stage 4 cancer, people that couldn't walk, couldn't see, paralyzed, go home, make arrangements. Through the power of prayer and this good, wonderful medicine, it helped, it cured our relatives. So here we are today that we're spiritually disciplined. We're here advocating for a way of life. Not only our Native American church, we have 574 tribes have unique ways and beliefs and customs that they have. So here we are coming here once again, sharing our concerns and doing all that we need to do. So along the way, we have our testimony here, and everything is the logistics of what we're asking in here. And on the religion, we all know when we kind of say that around here, it's kind of really sensitive. If you could just open up your heart and open up your mind and see about our needs. The government is not endorsing a religion. Instead, it's protecting the free exercise of a religion by creating a protective law. So when ARFA was amended in '94, Congress defined the protection of the purity under the First Amendment by the mere act of creating protections. Congress exempt the application of the Establishment Clause. The U.S. government did not endorse a religion. Instead, it protected under the First Amendment. So I'm just here to re-express that, shine light on that, and also our sovereignty, where this ARFA, where that was mentioned in there. So we're shining light on our sovereignty and our ceremonial way of life.
Well, we appreciate you coming and doing that.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Thanks for all your testimony today. Ms. Pingree?
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony. Really appreciated the emphasis on Indian health and sort of your perspective to the bigger picture, not just tribe by tribe. So obviously we have some big issues to deal with on the costs and the mandatory funding. And the child welfare, we've heard about that from a few tribes, but I really do appreciate the work you bring to sort of the national picture. And I thought it was very helpful to hear about the specifics when a tribe has enough funds to sort of get creative with their programs, how much they can do and how great their success can be. So I hope we can support more of that. And I'll have to learn more about the specifics around peyote. It's not something I'm that familiar with, and I will get up to speed. But thank you for being with us today.
Also, I have this for congressional record for more documentation.
Great.
We got a lot of our resolutions from tribes. So,
Ms. McCollum?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the specific. We talked about Tawahi and some of that's doing that's giving creativity to tribes and that. So all these court cases, you know, that's good, but then we have to honor the court cases as well as the treaties. So thank you for pointing that out. And maybe we can have peace in the valley here between the agencies. We try.
All we got to do is work together, and we can remove barriers or find out where the barriers are.
We've been saying that about Congress for years. But anyway, I appreciate all your testimony, and we'll certainly take it into consideration as we're trying to draft this bill today. Thank you.
Oh, Ata, thank you.
Our last panel this morning is Verlon Jose, William Maribal, and Lionel Haskey. How you doing? Okay, Verlon, you're up first.
Good morning, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I am Verlon Jose, Chairman of the Tohono O'odham Nation. The nation appreciates the opportunity to testify today and your commitment to provide critically needed funding for Indian country. First, respectfully, I ask that prioritize funding for our roads. The nation's roads are in very poor condition and making them dangerous for our members, tribal and federal law enforcement, and emergency vehicles. Monsoon flooding completely washes out reservation roads, stranding and endangering members. Despite the state of the nation's and other tribal roads, the Bureau of Indian Affairs Road Maintenance Program continues to face a huge backlog and is chronically underfunded. More funding is needed for FY 2025. In addition, many of our roads are used and damaged by Customs and Border Protection. We are grateful that since FY 2018, Appropriations legislation has authorized CBP to transfer funding from the Bureau of Indian Affairs to repair some of the nation's roads. Continued funding is critical for the safety of our members, as well as federal and tribal law enforcement. Next, I want to underscore our need for water settlement funding. The nation was one of the first tribes to enter into a federally approved water rights settlement and is in negotiations to settle its remaining claims. Separately, the nation also holds a water entitlement for the northern portion of our reservation, which we have never been able to use because of unexploded ordnance left in this area from World War II by the federal government. Unfortunately, our existing water settlement has never been fully implemented because of the chronic underfunding and agencies' lack of funds for cleanup of the unexploded ordinance. Funding is also needed to address the unique public safety and law enforcement challenges relating to our 62 shared border with Mexico. The nation works closely with CBP and other law enforcement agencies to secure the border, but federal financial support is extremely limited. Every year, the nation spends more than $3 million on its own money to help meet the United States border security responsibilities. The nation's police department is housed in a converted 1950s era BIA jail, which is inadequate to handle current law enforcement responsibilities. The nation's detention center is also in poor condition. In April of 2023, Interior Office of Inspector General report highlighted immediate health and safety concerns at the facility, which have yet to be addressed. Congress should incrementally increase funding for tribal law enforcement and corrections over the next 5 years to begin to address what BIA estimates is more than $3 billion in unmet needs. Greater federal investment is also needed to address our failing Indian Health Service facilities. The current IHS maintenance and alteration and repair backlog is $1 billion. The nation's 50-year-old hospital in South Arizona is one of the oldest IHS facilities and has been on the IHS facilities construction priority list for over 30 years. Due to its age and lack of modern equipment, the South Hospital is unable to serve the broad range of healthcare needs of the nation's citizens. Although we finally have received some initial funding for a replacement hospital, additional funding will be needed before it is complete. Finally, more funding for Bureau of Indian Education facilities construction is critical. In its latest facilities report, BIA lists 2 out of 5 of the nation's BIE-funded schools as being in poor condition. One of those, the Santa Rosa Ranch School, was forced to close in 2018 due to significant safety issues and still has not been replaced with a permanent facility. Poor conditions at BIE schools put Native students at a significant, unfair educational disadvantage. The nation urges Congress to provide additional funding for critically needed BIE facilities constructions. Thank you for your time today. I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Verlin. Lawrence, you're next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Lawrence Mirabal, and I'm the Vice President of Operations at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I'm grateful for the opportunity to present testimony on behalf of the college today. The narrative of IAIA is a testament to resilience, inspiration, and achievement over more than 6 decades. Our mission is to empower creativity and leadership in indigenous arts and cultures through higher education, lifelong learning, and community engagement. IAIA is the birthplace of contemporary Native art and holds a unique position as one of only 3 colleges in the United States chartered by Congress. At IAIA, meaningful dialogue occurs, skills are honed, and creativity flourishes. World-class educational experiences happen inside our studio and classroom walls. Outstanding students, faculty, and staff gather to advance student success. The college embraces its rich history while actively working to shape the future. IAIA offers bachelor's programs in studio arts, cinematic arts and technology, creative writing, museum studies, indigenous liberal studies, and performing arts, as well as graduate degrees in creative writing, studio arts, and cultural administration. The college is accredited by the Higher Learning Commission and serves over 850 students, representing 38 states and 94 tribes from across North America, over 80% of which are Pell eligible. IAIA is reshaping the narrative surrounding higher education within indigenous communities and is laying the groundwork for making a college degree achievable for first-generation students. The entire college community is deeply grateful for your consistent and robust support. IAIA has a history marked by substantial growth and resilience. This subcommittee remains a steadfast collaborator in advancing the college's mission and promoting higher education in indigenous communities. The college's 25 budget request includes a modest increase of $500,000 from the amount enacted for fiscal year 24. Funding at the requested level will support IAIA in effectively addressing several key priorities. In its commitment to attract and retain exceptionally skilled faculty and staff, IAIA recognizes the ongoing challenges within the labor market. As these challenges persist, it has become essential for the college to secure the necessary resources to remain competitive. This includes ensuring appropriate compensation for faculty through a well-defined rank and step schedule and providing staff with a modest cost of living adjustment. The resources sought in the FY25 budget are vital to these efforts. Additionally, IAIA remains challenged by the persistent impacts of inflation on operations. Costs related to materials, essential contract services, and utilities continue to grow exponentially. Continued support in this area will be necessary to sustain operations at their current levels. The college is constantly working to identify opportunities for enhancing learning outcomes. The College Bridge program at IAIA has demonstrated remarkable success in equipping incoming freshmen for college life, and our One-Up program for English and Math developmental students has shown impressive outcomes. Both programs have demonstrated their effectiveness in preparing students for higher education by establishing college-level study habits early on and offering opportunities to connect with other motivated learners. Securing funding for these initiatives in the FY25 budget will be essential to continue this work. IAIA prioritizes student success, placing it at the forefront of its mission. This commitment is evident in the numerous accomplished authors, studio artists, curators, and filmmakers who have proudly walked across our commencement stage with a diploma in hand, many of whom are using the power of their degrees to improve their families' lives and uplift their home communities. The subcommittee plays a pivotal role as a partner in sustaining this success. To advance this important work, we respectfully seek the subcommittee's support for the college's funding request of $13,982,000 in the independent agency's title of your bill. On behalf of IAIA students, faculty, and staff, we extend our sincere gratitude for your thoughtful consideration. I also would like to extend an invitation to all members of this committee to come visit our campus in Santa Fe and see the impact that your support has had firsthand. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Lionel, you're next.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Simpson, Ranking Member Pingree, and members of the subcommittee. Good afternoon. My name is Lionel Haskey, and I am the Director of Operations 638 in Public Relations, Government Relations, at the Navajo Agricultural Products Industry. We're located in Farmington, New Mexico, and it's a big farm. On behalf of the Navajo Agricultural Products Industry, we refer to that as NAPI. Thank you for allowing us to testify to the subcommittee today. My testimony will focus on the critical needs for increased funding for the infrastructure and farm development, as well as repairs and maintenance at the Navajo Indian Irrigation Project. The Navajo Indian Irrigation Project is located off the San Juan River in the Upper Colorado River Basin. At NAPI, we are the operators and managers of a corporate farm for the Navajo Nation. We were created as an enterprise to operate and develop the Navajo Indian Irrigation Project. NAPI runs a successful farming operation in the Upper Colorado River. We support the food production for the larger part of the Southwest. The food production that we grow on the farm goes toward the beef, the pork, the poultry, the dairy industries of New Mexico and Arizona. You'll find trucks loaded with our alfalfa driving the freeways, interstate freeways and the highways out there. We employ about 1,000. The Navajo Indian Irrigation Project has about 1,000 direct jobs that range from farming production to engineering, construction, automations, you name it. It's a very 21st century farm layout and benefits the area significantly. NAPI's efforts are unfortunately hindered by the federal government's failure to meet requirements under the Public Law 87-483 and to provide necessary funding for NIP, Navajo Indian Irrigation Project operations and maintenance expenses that are obligated by the Public Law 93-638. Public Law 87-483 is the law that was signed in 1962 to develop 110,630 acres of irrigable farms in the Farmington area. The farm was given diversion rights of 508,000 acre-foot of water off the San Juan River. We use about 200,000 acre-foot of water at the moment because the project is partially completed. It's about 70% built, and there are infrastructures that are put in place currently that are not yet being utilized. Our ask today is very simple. We want the federal government to meet its legal and trust obligations to fund the following. $25.5 million in funding for the Natural Resources Management, Irrigation Operations and Maintenance Program for fiscal year 2025. The NIPS operations and maintenance costs currently for the calendar year is $8.7 million out of that amount. The second would be $35 million requests for the WIN Act, Public Law 114-322, Title III, Subtitle B, Irrigation Rehabilitation and Renovation for the Indian Tribal Governments and Their Economies Program. This funding will ensure that we fix the broken system. The system is about 40-plus years old. It has 6 miles of siphon repairs that we'd like to do, about 300 miles of pipeline, and rehabilitations of various pumping, modernization of various pumping plants to make the system more efficient. And lastly, $30 million for irrigation construction to continue to build our Block 9. That's about 10,000 acres. About 5,000 acres of that is already partially constructed. The construction annual allocations are a little too low at $3.4 million currently. We'd like to raise that to $12 million, and that would be coming out of the $30 million for irrigation construction funding. That's part of the Resources Management Construction Fund. Because the federal government has yet to meet these obligations, the Navajo Nation is unable to reap the benefits under this law, and the Navajo farm is continuing to be hindered, thereby not being able to supply the food production for the Southwest. Again, thank you for allowing me to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions on this funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Lionel. Shelley.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the concerns that you brought up, many of them that we've heard earlier related to things like challenges with roads, but you have some unique issues that you're dealing with that border and the unexploded ordinance, so I hope we can help in some ways some of the things that you're dealing with that are unique to your tribe and your reservation. And thank you very much. I'm not familiar with the farming operation, and it was interesting to hear about that, so I'll read up about that a little bit more, but like so many places, water is the hindrance, and a water settlement that's incomplete that the government agreed to seems to be part of your issue, so I hope we can deal more with that. It's nice to see the production that you're already doing that is available to the tribe, but obviously there should be so much more, so I hope we can help. And I'm not sure I was aware before, maybe I've just learned this and I forgot about it, that there was a Indian Arts Tribal College, but it sounds wonderful, and I'm glad that we do have such a facility that is promoting the incredible talent of Indian youth. I was pleased to see this year at the Biennale in Vienna, there is a in Venice, sorry. There's a Indian artist who is featured as the United States Pavilion, so that's one of the first times I think that a Native American has been featured as the artist. So that's nice to see, but we should be seeing so much more of that and should be supporting the education of tribal youth. So I'll have to follow up on that. But thank you so much, all of you, for your testimony today. Yield back.
Thank you all for being here. Just out of curiosity, the Navajo trucks that I see driving around in the West, are they owned by the Navajo Nation, or is that, I didn't know that, or whether they were just the name of a company?
They are owned by Navajo truckers.
Okay.
They don't necessarily belong to the same logistical company, but they're all independent truckers, and they move our products from Farmington to Flagstaff.
Okay, interesting. I've been going to make it down to the Art Institute for about, 8 or 9 years. Obviously, haven't made it yet, but I want to get down there. And I guess you just got to kind of set your mind you're going to do it and do it, So I will try to make it down there. Thank you all for your testimony today. We look forward to working with you as we try to put this budget together and stuff. Thanks for the information.
Thank you.
The committee will stand adjourned until, 1:15?